Shaggy and the others stared blank-faced at Slink, waiting for the young player to explain. But no explanation was forthcoming. Slink was busying himself with both the table and the written reports all around him. Soon Shaggy and the others burst out with multiple questions, filling the room with raised voices. Levy raised a purple fist and set off a burst of energy that scorched the ceiling. The room fell silent save for Slink, still frantically typing away. Levy gave them all a sharp look before she turned to the boy. "Slink, talk and work." "Huh? Oh, I'm combining the most recent reports, trying to find discrepancies. We know the Quinnica were in their hideouts along the main road before the raid. But now they are nowhere to be seen. Could the scouts be wrong? Did they miss something?" Vlad asked. Slink shook his head. "They are untrained and new to their jobs. But they know when a building is empty. I've got 2 reports from some of Ephemera's people that made it into Quinnica buildings. They found nothing. Some of my own people have reported collapsed buildings and stripped down storefronts." Ren rubbed his leathery chin. "They took their shit and ran, really?" "Hell no," Shaggy said. "No way, they just dump their leadership on us and take off?" "What about the Elder of Elders, or whatever they are?" "The Ancient One," Dave supplied, still watching the shifting hollow table. "Yeah, that guy? Probably a myth the Elders were throwing around to keep the ramble in line as they lost turf." "Unsure. We're trying to confirm reports about the Quinnica's leadership structure. But this is looking to be true. We are going to have to confirm some of this. But according to everything I have, the Quinnica have abandoned their turf." "Wait, isn't that a good thing? That means we won, right?" Ren shook his head as he crossed his massive arms. "No. The terms of the gang war were the complete destruction of either side's leadership. We've killed a lot of the elders. But if we had gotten all of them, we'd have gotten a notification saying we won." Shaggy growled. "So they saw we were winning and went into hiding. Smart, honestly. Can't kill their leadership if we don't know where they are. It also buys them time to regroup and call in more reinforcements. So that's good then. They broke the terms of engagement. Can we take that to the fore?" Levy spoke up. Vlad snorted. "Hardly. That's a club that looks after their own." Surprisingly, negotiations were like pulling teeth. Getting them to recognize us as an actual gang was already a pain in the dick. The only reason they met with me is because they wanted to demand that we disperse. When I told them off, they threatened to come down on us. The racks and the freaks hate our damn guts. But thankfully, the governor stepped in. They have an almost debilitating sense of honor." "And the racks just obeyed?" Shaggy asked, unconvinced. "Again, not really. The governor got all the heads to agree to let the Quinnica deal with us. Probably thought it would be a cakewalk. When we started taking turf, the space vamps panicked and threw their elders at us." "Well, that's suspicious," Levy said. "Why throw their leadership at you right off the bat? I mean, I understand striking with your heaviest hand. But what are they holding back if they let the elders loose so easily?" Vlad rubbed his face and stayed silent. Everyone around the table was silent, contemplating the Quinnica's actions. Shaggy was sure either the freaks or racks had offered the parasites a hole to hide in. But if they marched into either of their turfs, they would be in for a shitstorm. It was a dicey situation. One which had Dave grinning as Shaggy looked at him. "Dudes, stop freaking about it. We won." Ren sighed. "No. Dave, we didn't win. We have to kill their leaders. Which we can't do if we can't find them." "Like, I get that. But we can't find them without marching into someone else's area, right? So let's just not do that?" "You suggesting we do nothing?" Shaggy asked, bewildered. "Nah, dude. We keep looking for the vamp dudes. But meanwhile we take their turf and turtle up. I mean, between us and the brutes we have enough to guard our borders. Our biggest problem was the power discrepancy between the vamps and us, right? So we take this time and power up. Dave smiled widely as he looked around the table and continued. We get the chair kid to build us some weapons. Set up shops on the main road. And train our crew, right? Meanwhile, Vlad, you go to that cool place and ask your new friends to look for the vamps for us. They went part of the par thingy. So they are fair game, right? Vlad's eyes were wide with understanding and Shaggy thought the vampire was about to facepalm. He wanted to know what place Dave was talking about and by the looks on Slink and Ren's faces. They did too. Had Vlad and Dave been hanging out recently in game? That was an odd pairing. When Vlad wasn't quickly forthcoming with more information and Dave was happily gazing at the hollow table again, Shaggy asked. New friends, people we need to know about, Vlad? Vlad snapped out of his thoughts and turned back to the rest of the table. When he saw Shaggy, his smile grew wider. And a shiver chased itself up Shaggy's back. Suddenly, he wasn't sure he wanted to meet Vlad's new friends. Not with the vampire grinning like that. I will not ruin the surprise, Shaggy. But suffice it to say, I think you are going to love them. I need to see to my thralls first, though. Slink, anything need doing around here? Plenty. But I have a few lackeys on things. If no one minds, I'm going to start Dave's plan. We can see if anyone in the neighborhood wants a shop on Main Street. We'll need to clear out those back alleys. Ren cracked his knuckles. I'll do it. I need something to punch. And I'm sure my boys could use a break from moving shipments. I'll assign some of the new people to guard duty then. Slink said, carefully watching Ren's face. A hard look came over the Rhino Man's alien face, but he quickly stomped it out. With no other word, the big player turned out of the room and walked out. He gave Dave's shoulder a brief pat on the way. Shaggy nodded. Dave had really come through. While the rest of them were overthinking about the Quinnica, Dave was thinking about building their empire. Nice one, Dave. Shaggy said, moving toward the door himself. Levy followed closely behind and Slink called after them. What will y'all be up to? Shaggy shrugged. I'm going to check in with my pack. Maybe look around to see what can be done. If you have anything, let me know. Slink nodded and turned to Levy. The tall drow woman smiled. I'm going to take a few of the mages and return to our other base. We need to strengthen the defenses there as well as solidify the portal. Slink swore. Shit. Forgot about that. We need people over there? Shaggy shook his head. Just a small defensive force. Maybe a few runners to tell us if there is trouble and some scouts to go topside. Levy, do you mind? Slink asked hesitantly. Not at all. I'll oversee things there and try to figure out if we can join up that terminal with this war table. Slink sighed. That would be a big help, thanks. Levy smiled as she and Shaggy made for the door again. But Vlad's voice slowed Shaggy. Stay close, Shags. I really want you to meet my friends. You know, when you say creepy shit like that, you scare everyone. I am a vampire. You're not going to tell me anything about these friends, are you? Not a damn thing. Should I bring my pack? No. I won't be bringing my thralls if that makes you feel better. It really doesn't. Shaggy left the room with Levy by his side. He tried not to think about what his vampire friend had in store for him. He knew there was no way Vlad would put him in danger. But he was also sure the bastard was going to do something annoying. He heard Levy giggling next to him as they made the short walk back to the common room. Oh, I sense mischief is coming. She smiled. Please take pictures for me, or a video. Absolutely not. If you want to see what Vlad has planned, you must never leave my side. Shaggy joked, adopting a faux accent. Levy took up the accent. Alas. I am afraid I must away. to a dark and damp cave where our wooden hovel resides. But call upon me, and I shall rush to your side anon." "Anon?" Shaggy asked, dropping the accent. Levy shrugged. "I do not know. It sounded good, though. But really, I want to get things set up over there. Also, there's a forum thread about COG that's gaining traction." Shaggy ears perked up, but Levy didn't elaborate. He glanced up at her, to see if she was being purposefully coy. But she was deep in thought, idly stroking her pet pixie. The damn thing had slept throughout the fight and the meeting. Although, Shaggy remembered that the little thing had helped with the portals. It was likely extremely drained. "Anything interesting?" "Apparently, my dark mistress is searching for him. She's calling for all magic users to help with a scrying spell. Can't be that much of a call if you haven't heard it. Right?" Levy bit her lip and said nothing. "Have you been hearing the Mad Witch Corgan in your head?" Shaggy asked, both amazed and a little affronted. "No. Not like that. But I've been feeling a pull. Something asking me to return to Corgan's pocket dimension." "So? Why haven't you gone?" Levy slapped Shaggy's shoulder, and he was sure he heard a pop come from his wife's hand. She glared daggers at him as a purple glow formed around her hand. But with the look she was giving him, Shaggy thought it best not to mention it. Instead, he just stared at her, confused. "I just got back and you already want me to leave? We haven't played that much together. You're already going back to our other base. Besides, once we find COG, you and I will send out the word and march on the bastard with as many players as we can muster." "I know. I just missed you." Shaggy gave Levy's cheek a small peck. "I missed you too. But we'll be playing this game for a long time. We'll have plenty of time to explore the world together. What if, after COG, we run away together? Just the two of us?" Levy grinned. "What about the Legion? They can handle themselves. Shit, we were above ground for over a week and they barely needed us. They can give us a few more just so we can find trouble for ourselves." "What about your harem?" Levy's eyes twinkled as she asked. Shaggy groaned and raised a hand. His fingers flexed, ready to deliver a flick to his wife's forehead or ear. But she dodged away, cackling madly. They drew the attention of several lackeys as Shaggy chased her a short distance. Eventually, she spun and raised a hand. "Stop. You're liable to do actual damage with your strength. I'm just a squishy mage." Shaggy growled playfully and shook his head. He gave her another quick kiss before he looked around. They were standing in a short hall on the other side of the common room. Levy was pointed toward a wooden door. Probably where she and her mage friends had put the portal. She was on her way out and Shaggy needed to check in with his own crew. He sighed. "Hiya. Try not to cause too much trouble." Shaggy joked. Levy pinched his cheek. "You're the one staying here, love. Amongst this den of criminals and women. I expect your cadre of battle maidens will runneth over by my return. Please. I'm hanging out with Vlad. That ham only attracts flies." Levy snorted but said nothing more. She gave him a quick kiss and rushed through the wooden door. Shaggy glimpsed the large pink portal to their cave before the door swung shut. He let out another sigh before moving through the common area and back up to the main bar floor. Things on the first floor were coming back together. Tables were being replaced, chairs were righted and customers were trickling in. Undertown. Where it could be an all-out fight 1 minute and the next people were giving you money for a hamburger. Shaggy shook his head and used his pack link to find his pack. Rita was outside, while Vic and Sybil were on the second floor. Ephemera was out of range, surprisingly, and Tom seemed to be scouting nearby. Although Shaggy guessed the lithe werewolf was looting bodies or buildings. Finally, it felt like Seacrest and Stanley were also out front but away from Rita for some reason. Shaggy left Vic and Sybil to whatever they were doing upstairs and went in search of Rita. If he guessed right, she wouldn't be far from the teens. He quickly crossed the bar floor, giving several servers and Petra a nod of acknowledgement before he pushed out the front door. Outside, the scene was more chaotic, but also coming together. Bodies were piled up, debris was being moved toward the bar, and people were scattered about having conversation. Shaggy spotted Rita immediately and smiled as he made out Dragan, Branka, and a few others. But raised voices near Seacrass and Stanley spun his head around. A crowd had formed around the two, and briefly Shaggy was worried. But then when he got closer, Shaggy noticed that the two strong men of his pack were wrestling lackeys. Seacrass and Stanley were surrounded by a large circle of leather-clad NPCs. All of whom were cheering and shouting as both men threw their poor sparring partners around. Shaggy pushed his way through, sending Rita a quick, need-to-talk pull on his link. Shaggy watched as Stanley stood his ground as two lackeys launched themselves at him. Stanley gripped one by the waist as the other tackled him from the side. But the boy stayed upright as he casually tossed the held lackey away. Meanwhile, his friend was trying to take Stanley to the dirt. Of course, with the kid's enhanced strength, he barely budged. Stanley swiped a forearm into the other man's stomach and watched him collapse as all the air was pushed out of him. Stanley circled on the spot, raising his arms in triumph as people catcalled and booed. Shaggy saw money exchanging hands as people turned their attention to Seacrass. The big lizard man was ducking and weaving around a Paranadon and an alligator-looking alien. Careful not to use his sharp claws, Seacrass casually slapped the alligator man across their long snout. They went spinning into the dirt before rolling away. The Paranadon was more straightforward. Lumbering in a charge that had their head down and horn poised to stab into Seacrass. But Shaggy's lizard was more than ready. He spun around the charge, getting his own massive arms around the Paranadon's waist. Shaggy winced as he knew what was about to happen. Seacrass gave a loud grunt as he lifted the large rhino alien into the air and bent backwards. The crowd gave an audible gasp as Seacrass suplexed the Paranadon into the dirt. Their body went limp and Seacrass rolled away before springing to his feet, ready for the alligator to attack again. But the alien was done. He waved a hand at Seacrass and walked away. An annoyed cry went up from the crowd as people shouted and pushed, trying to get to the alligator. Shaggy shook his head as new contenders started for his two pack mates. A voice at his side brought him around to see Rita. You'd think they'd be tired. They just fought off a load of Quinnica. But, no. These idiots still want to punch things. Lackeys will be lackeys. Shaggy shrugged. Rita quirked an eyebrow. I meant our two idiots. Meh. Stanley could use the experience, and I'm willing to bet Seacrass ain't even trying. Besides, our home crew could use some combat training. Seems kind of wasteful to have a bunch of unpowered get trounced by a couple of werewolves. But whatever you say, boss. What did you need? Shaggy started walking away from the small mass of people. I just wanted an update on both the pack and the kids. How's everything going? Well, Ephemera ran off. Wanting to scout the Quinnica turf. Tom said something about securing assets. Sybil and Vic wanted to see if their old rooms were still available. You've already seen the two dinguses, and then the kids are a mixed bag. Mixed bag? Yeah. You've dropped a gang of street kids into a large criminal organization. There's going to be some growing pains. Most of them have circled up and are keeping to themselves. Do they want to go back? The portal is ready and waiting. Also, Levy is going to be overseeing things over there. So they'll have someone they know. Rita nodded. That might be good for some of them. But others, like Branka, are ready to help out. Though I want to take them out in groups to get the lay of the land. I hear there are still cogbots to the east. They're not the easiest of targets, but... Shaggy grinned as she trailed off. It's how you lot got started. Rita shrugged his shoulder, but didn't disagree. What's going on in the world of the head honchos? Our prey ran away, and we don't know where. I wanted to put ephemera on it. but I'd bet she already is. Otherwise, we are in a holding pattern. Get some missions from Slink and upgrade your equipment. I hear Rold is getting a shop on our turf. Remind him how much we helped him before and see if you'll get a discount. So we just wait. Rita grimaced. Shaggy laughed. Haha. There's always something to do, Rita. But for now, I'm going with Vlad to secure some outside help. I want the pack helping the Legion wherever possible. And the kids? Shaggy could hear the edge in Rita's voice, and he smiled. They are part of the Legion now. So you have to help them out. Like I said. Humph. I'll be put in charge of that, will I? Well, I could get Tom to do it. Shaggy joked. Shaggy nodded. I know you will. A raucous cheer went up from the crowd around Stanley, and Seacrass and Shaggy thought of something. Make sure Stanley stays. He didn't finish, but Rita nodded. Getting his point. No sense letting the lackeys know until the kid had ingratiated himself more with the entire group. Shaggy sighed then as he had finished what he had wanted to talk about. Rita seemed to notice he was done and walked away, back toward the kids. Shaggy gave her a wave and tried to think of something to do before Vlad was ready to go. But said vampire's voice brought him out of his thoughts. Ready to go, Wolf? Shaggy turned to see Vlad had changed clothes. He was now in a different black suit, complete with a top hat and a red and black half-cape thing. Shaggy looked down to see Vlad's slim black dress shoes covered with dirt, and he raised an eyebrow. The vampire shrugged. Concessions must be made even when it comes to fashion. I hope you're not expecting me to dress up too, vampire. I wouldn't think of it, Shaggy. Getting you into proper attire would be tantamount to wrestling an alligator into a wetsuit. Shaggy smiled at the image before he continued their banter. So where are we going and why does Dave know about it? Vlad grinned, showing off his fangs. The establishment I wish to visit is one that caters to a certain clientele. Players? Shaggy asked. Vlad's grin grew ever more wide and Shaggy felt another shiver go up his spine. He didn't know what was about to happen. But he was sure he was going to hate it. How we roll? Shaggy asked. They were approaching another squat, square-looking building made of wood. But unlike the buildings surrounding it, the building was extremely nice-looking. The wooden planks in its construction weren't bent or rotted. Its roof was flat, but had a nice and complete awning going all the way around. The sign above its long heavy-looking double-door entrance was also well-crafted with fine calligraphy telling you where you were. Shaggy looked back at Vlad. When the vampire didn't answer. The man's smile was only getting larger and Shaggy couldn't contain himself much longer. The sounds of cheering and shouting emanating from the building made him think the place was another bar. But Shaggy wasn't sure why Dave and Vlad would come here when they already had their own place. Maybe they were scouting the competition? He had to admit it was in a safer part of Undertown with more foot traffic. Although Shaggy noted that not many people were going inside. Most of the NPCs in the streets just walked right by the place, unmoved by the raucous laughter and merriment. The glass windows in the front were frosted though. So they offered Shaggy zero indication of what lay within. Just prepare yourself, Shaggy. Vlad grinned. Prepare myself for what? What the hell is in there? It sounds like a damn bar. A bar which is serving our competitors, by the way. Shaggy watched as another UGB patrol walked by them. It was the fourth one he'd seen since they left their turf. Someone was obviously keeping an eye on them and they weren't being subtle about it. They weren't that far from Undertown's center. But Shaggy had made sure to tag the patrol's scent. There were 2 pairs of them, constantly circling Vlad and him like a quartet of vultures. Vlad snickered. Oh, don't worry. This place is set to player only. The natives can't see it. Vlad moved and grabbed Shaggy's shoulder, leading him toward the large double doors. Shaggy let himself be dragged as he tried to work out how the system did that. He wondered what the NPCs saw when they looked at the building. Then he wondered why the players would set a bar to player only. What were they doing in there that they didn't want the natives to see? How we roll, Shaggy mouthed as Vlad placed his arm the door and pushed. Huzzah! Huzzah! We are adventurers of the cyberworld. Huzzah! Huzzah! Fighting nobly, banners unfurled. Huzzah! Huzzah! I hate you! Shaggy yelled over the tumult and the drunken singing. Men and women in fantasy garb slammed tankards of liquid onto wooden tables as they joked and sang. Swords and shields dotted the walls and some chairs. Players hung off wooden chandeliers above as people tossed random things at them. The bar was staffed by their players that were acrobatically tossing drinks around like it was a damn circus. Shaggy noted the sign above the bar and winced. Please respect other people's roleplay. He drug a hand down his face and groaned. It's a goddamn RP bar. No. Vlad whispered, smiling. It's an amazing RP bar. The vampire hurried through the mass of bodies that were dancing and cavorting. Shaggy had to admit, it was the most amount of players he had seen in one spot. At least since the tutorial event. Shaggy kept his head down as he tried to follow Vlad. What ho! Fair creature of darkness. Have you finally come to be free of your cursed existence? A burly man in leather armor called, clearly addressing Vlad. Please ignore him. Shaggy wished futilely. If I thought one of you foul adventurers capable of such a task, I would have already bled you dry. Vlad called back. Fully in character and showing off his fangs. A cheer went up from several people and Shaggy tried to duck his head even further into his chest. Thankfully, Vlad didn't engage in long conversation. Instead, he gave the adventurers a kind wave and moved closer to the bar. Shaggy hurried to follow, but stopped as a sudden cry went up from nearby. Bread! Bread! Where's the damn bread? I can't live without my bread. Dude, chill out. Man, you are so annoying. Everything is so annoying. Why do I have to do anything? It's all annoying. You kids need to calm down. Why when I was your age I never freaked out as much as you two do over the littlest thing. Geez. Also, barkeep. Where the hell is my plate of candy? Shaggy blinked at the pink-haired little girl and the two black-haired boys all shouting incoherently at each other. They seemed to be having a conversation, but each one was only roughly listening to the other two. Vlad's hand wrapped back around Shaggy's shoulder and dragged him away. That's the ice guy table. Leave them alone. Vlad whispered as they wound their way closer to the bar. Shaggy merely blinked as more singing and carousing drowned out the odd table. His vision swam as he looked around. There were tables of people dressed in full black leather and sunglasses. People in the traditional fantasy armors and even a table of people in some kind of multicolored robes. All representing different genres of fiction and all engrossed in their own RP conversations. Shaggy had to ask. These people know they are in a superhero game, right? Vlad hissed. Of course they know. Sure, you can have plenty of fun acting within the confines of the game we are given. But why not add your own little spice to it? Character creation allows for all sorts of power sets. Vlad pointed at several tables and explained in turn. We got sci-fi type powers, cultivation types, fantasy-based, ice guy, reincarnated. We have everything, and this is a safe place for those people to share their characters. Shaggy tried hard not to roll his eyes as they finally arrived at the bar. A bartender immediately spotted them and raised a finger as he was helping a customer. Vlad nodded good-naturedly and they squeezed in next to a pair of players dressed in more modern clothes. Shaggy tried not to listen, but the conversation filled his ears anyway. And that's when that damn truck came along and wham. Then I found myself lying in the street outside. Said the one closest to Shaggy's shoulder. Ah, said his friend. The almighty Truck-Kuan. Truck-Kuan? A random voice asked. Truck-Kuan. The whole bar almost shook with the resounding noise of everyone shouting at the same time. Shaggy growled low in his chest, making the guy next to him turn. Whoa. There are dogmen in this world? Arg harg. Shaggy gripped his head and roared to the sky. Several players pulled away, but many more used his outburst as an excuse to keep playing their character. Shaggy rubbed his temples as he did his best to reel in his wolf. The beast wanted to rage and Shaggy almost wanted to let it. But then he saw a trio of seats at the end of the bar. Empty. With a small plaque right in front of them. Shaggy read the words on the plaque and made a mad dash toward that corner of the bar, almost throwing people out of his way. He leapt for the first seat and slammed into its cushion. As he did, the sounds around him became muffled and he gave a world-weary sigh. A bartender approached with a small grimace on her face. She took in Shaggy's countenance and set her teeth. Tisk, welcome to the OOC corner. What can I get you? Beer. All the beer. Shaggy grumbled as he rubbed his head. There was a small humming sound as Vlad stuck his head into the magical cone around the OOC chairs. You're no fun. Vlad said, grinning. My revenge will be swift, Vladdy. I promise you. Sir, I am going to have to ask you to refrain from any character talk while in the out-of-character corner. Shaggy glared back at the bartender. Oh, I am not kidding. The bartender waved her hand at the other players in the bar. Neither are any of them, sir. The woman spun on her heel and walked away. To get his beer, Shaggy hoped. He slunk into the short back of his chair and glared at Vlad, who for once looked worried. Dude, don't you dare get me kicked from here. I like this place. The vampire said worriedly. Shaggy waved his friend off. Don't worry about it. I ain't here to say anyone's fun is wrong. But it ain't my bag of tea. Can we just do what we came here for? Yeah. But we'll have to do it outside of this cone of silence thing. The bartender returned and tossed Shaggy's drink down unceremoniously. She glared at him and then walked away. But Shaggy wasn't paying any attention as he downed the whole tankard. Once he was done, he continued. Why? He asked, trying not to sound whiny. Can't we just bring them in here? Shaggy felt his eye start to twitch and he had to silence another growl. He raised his empty tankard up. But all three bartenders were actively ignoring him. Shaggy slammed his mug on the counter and growled. Getting up, he waved for Vlad to lead the way. His vampire friend smiled and ducked his head back out of the magical cone that muffled sound. Shaggy tossed his mug at the nearest bartender and followed. He heard a satisfying crunch and loud yelp of pain. But he ignored it as he pushed his way into the crowd to follow Vlad. The vampire was glaring at him a little ways down the bar. But Shaggy ignored him and looked around. Several people were giving him the stink eye, but Shaggy ignored them as well. Well? Vlad huffed and moved to the other end of the bar. There was a large board set up there, with multiple post-it notes. Some were written on paper, others were some sort of vellum, and then there were the holodisplays. Shaggy's eyes rolled across a couple of the messages on the board and he started to get it. Job board? Vlad nodded. Yeah. Players hiring other players to do some of the work from them. There are also a couple of players that post in-game quests on here, so that the community is all aware of what's going on. Shaggy nodded as Vlad grabbed a large piece of vellum from below the board. There was an ink and quill down there as well. But the vampire grabbed a simple pen. A question bubbled up into Shaggy's mouth and he let it loose. Do we have to make a post for each genre? No. Vlad sighed. Hey, I don't know the damn rules, okay. This place is weird as hell. So what are you doing? I am making a notice that we need some surreptitious help. I am also placing an alarm on it so that all interested parties will be notified as soon as I post it. So people looking for a quest will get a ding and then we meet with them? How long is that going to take? Vlad turned his eyes back to the bar. Do you see how many people are in here? Shaggy sighed and let Vlad finish writing and posting their little notice. A job board expelled a soft hum that rolled over Shaggy. Behind him, he heard several people stop chatting and even more chairs scrape against the floor. He turned and saw that a large portion of the bar was looking their way. It was a little unnerving. Those closest to the bar noticed it was Shaggy by the board and sat back down. A sour look on their faces. Others got up and started walking their way. Shaggy scanned the bar for an open table, but Vlad's voice brought him back around toward the bar. "Yes, we need an interview room," Vlad was saying. Shaggy turned to see an angry-looking bartender glaring at Shaggy over Vlad's shoulder. He was holding a small, white towel over his head. Shaggy bit back a laugh as he realized the white towel was slightly bloody. "Serve the bunch of weirdos right. Next time, get the werewolf a beer." Shaggy did his best to look sorry, but he didn't think Vlad or the bartender were buying it. After a quick exchange of credits, the bartender led them to a hallway behind the bar. 3 doors were set along the left-hand side, and they took the first one. The room was large and opulent, filled with a massive oblong table and 2 curved booth chairs on either side. Vlad slid onto the cushioned seat of the left-hand bench and Shaggy moved to join him. But the vampire hissed and shoved Shaggy back. He gave his friend an incredulous look as the bartender left and shut the door. "You're going to play the role of my bodyguard. I want you to stand there and look dumb and mean. If anyone tries to start anything, eject them gently. It's all part of the game." Shaggy blew out a breath. "I don't think that's a part of my wheelhouse." "Trust me. It most definitely is." Shaggy almost smiled until he realized Vlad had just called him dumb. He was about to refute that statement, but a knock at the door interrupted him. He gave Vlad some side-eye as he moved toward the door. But the vampire was busying himself trying to look regal and pompous. At least, that's what Shaggy assumed Vlad was doing as he set a napkin on his lap and pulled a long cord near his head. Shaggy heard a distant bell ring as he opened the door and came face to face with a cyborg. The half-human, half-robot face glared at him for a few minutes before its bright red eye glowed ominously. Shaggy took a step back and shifted his hands into claws. He didn't think the cyborg player was going to attack, but he didn't want to take chances. The young man grinned as his eye stopped glowing. "Werewolf. Enhanced strength and speed. Also appears to be capable of a partial shift. Threat level elevated," said the cyborg. "Pfft. You always say that, Brick. Let's just meet the fixer. No need to fuss with the help," came another voice behind the cyborg. Shaggy tried to look beyond the small cyborg. But for some reason, the hallway was a black void. Probably for security purposes. The cyborg gave Shaggy a smile before he moved into the room and took a seat opposite Vlad. He was followed by a female elf with a multicolored mohawk, a yellow orc with 2 robotic arms, and a trench coat wearing human. The elf and the orc joined the cyborg. But the human glared at Shaggy and slowly shut the door. Shaggy took in the human's leather-clad look and spotted a katana on the man's hip. The man rested his hand on the sword and gave Shaggy a saucy wink. Shaggy grinned back and raked a claw down his own face. He felt a twinge as his claw bit into his cheek, but it quickly receded as the wound closed as fast as it opened. The trench coat-wearing human's eyes went wide and Shaggy had to stifle a laugh. "If you two are quite finished," Vlad drawled. Shaggy shrugged and took up his place near Vlad's seat. All he had to do was look tough and keep the peace. Easy enough. Trenchcoat took his own spot near his crew and the 2 sides stared at each other. Vlad waited a few beats before he seemed to settle on his opening words. But the cyborg beat him to it. "What's the job?" Vlad grimaced but went along with the curt conversation. "Recon and identification. Target? Any and all of the Quinnica leadership in Undertown. Or topside," Shaggy added, drawing a hiss from Vlad. He shrugged. "We can't be sure they didn't scurry out of here entirely." Vlad nodded but gave Shaggy a dirty look. Apparently he wasn't playing the dumb guard well. But he had told Vlad that it wasn't his wheelhouse. Silly vampire. Why can't you do this? The orc grumbled. Vlad collected himself before responding. We have certain limitations placed on us at the moment. So we need this done quickly and quietly. Can we eliminate the targets? Shaggy looked down at Vlad. Trying to convey a look of would that work? The vampire seemed to take his meaning because he shrugged. Turning back to the silver-chromed and leather-clad group, Vlad said. Only as a last resort. We just need to know where they are. We'll take it from there. Credits will be rewarded based on speed and performance. The cyborg looked at his companions, his robotic side whirring and spinning as he glanced at them. Elf Lady gave a nod, while the orc shrugged. Trenchcoat seemed to think it over for a bit before he nodded as well. The cyborg turned back to the table and placed an upright hand on it. Vlad dug into his cape and pulled out a credit chit. He dropped it into the other player's hand. The robotic eye glowed again. The cyborg must have liked the price Vlad was paying, because his grin grew even more wide. Thank you kindly. The quartet of players slid from their bench and marched toward the door. One by one, they exited into the black void that was the RP bar's hallway. Before Trenchcoat entered, he gave Shaggy a two-fingered salute and fell backward into the void. Shaggy tried not to smile as the man disappeared. Try hard. Shaggy muttered, still biting back a smile. Well, be ready for more. We need all the help we can get. Vlad said as he pulled the cord again and waited. Shaggy figured that cord was a signal to send in the next group. A theory that was proven true as a few seconds later another knock came from their door. Shaggy sighed and swung the door open. This time all he saw was the black void. He tilted his head confused until an annoyed voice came from near his knees. The pink-haired little girl from earlier pushed her way past Shaggy and moved to the table. What? No candy? What kind of meeting is this? An annoying one. This is so annoying. Why are we doing this? It sucks. I just want to lay in my bed all day and do nothing. The teenage-looking boy whined all the way to the table as the third member of their party rushed into the room. The kid gripped Shaggy by his shirt, a manic look in his eyes. Shaggy could almost smell the legitimate sorrow coming off the kid as he looked at Shaggy and asked. Please, sir. Where is the bread? Shaggy sighed and said nothing as the door swung shut. It was going to be a long day. Shaggy was exhausted. They had met with several adventuring parties, and each one was more flamboyant than the next. Vlad had done most of the talking. But Shaggy still had to engage with and even toss a few of them out of their little booth. Some even seemed happy to be ejected. Like they were truly living their character's best life. They had spent hours explaining what they wanted repeatedly to multiple RPers. Shaggy almost felt a headache coming on. It wasn't that bad, Vlad said, as they made their way down the street. Shaggy slid past a group of people on the street and threw his friend a dirty look. Vlad had eaten it up. Playing the enigmatic and mysterious vampire lord. Shaggy was surprised so many of the players went along with Vlad's haughty attitude. But he guessed for a few credits and a decent job, our peers would put up with a lot. He shifted around more people in the street as he tried to glare holes in Vlad's head. But the vampire wasn't even looking at him. That was a cavalcade of crazy. Can we trust most of those people to do the job? Vlad shrugged. Most of them, sure. But you know gamers. They can get bored easy. So I'm sure we'll have a few drop out or not complete things. But that's why we pay once the job is done and according to how well the job is completed. Shaggy grunted. That sounded fine, but he didn't think he wanted to be associated with the bar of overacting theater kids. He sure as hell needed to keep Levy away from such a place. She would dive in with both feet and he wouldn't see his wife for days. Was thinking of ways to buy Vlad's silence when said vampire addressed him. So, what's your plan? For the foreseeable future, that is. I don't know. I was just going to stick around here and help Slink. We need to defend our borders. I also want to teach my pack how to shift. Levy is also looking for any word on Cog. Which is going to be a huge thing. That sexist old man with the robots? Yeah. Got to kill that guy for the blood god, you know. So Levy and I were thinking of getting a raid together with a bunch of players. According to the forums, both supes and villains want the guy taken out. Vlad raised an eyebrow. I thought you hated the forums? I don't hate the forums. I just don't like breaking my game immersion with out-of-game tools and mechanics. Where's the fun in searching for special drops or unique enemies if everything is mapped out for you on a forum? I think all the enemies in this game are unique. Also, I have seen little in the way of drops, to be honest. Mostly just credits and whatever weapons we can steal from the Quinnica. You know what I mean. Half the fun of gaming is discovery. Why let someone else do it for you? Vlad shrugged again. Whatever. So how you going to gather the players for your raid? Levy's handling that stuff. I'm just going to show up and kill an old guy. Maybe a few of his automatons, too. I figured we could get the Legion involved somehow. Although I don't know if we want to risk our crew. I don't know how squishy they are. Pretty squishy. I mean, some are enhanced, and we were training them up right. But a low-level Quinnica was still giving some of our guys trouble in close quarters. We have the ranged weapons to deal, but we need to toughen them up. Or. Vlad trailed off, and Shaggy turned to look at his friend. But the pale man was no longer looking at him as they walked. Vlad was slowing to a stop and looking up and down the street. Shaggy joined him and looked around. He hadn't run into any civilians in the last few minutes. In fact, the street was empty. Way too empty to be in the middle of the day in Undertown. The hairs on Shaggy's neck stood on end as he got a gut feeling. All was not well. How long? Shaggy asked. Not sure. It couldn't be more than a couple of minutes. But I don't hear anything. Shaggy took a long whiff of the air. But no scents came to him. Not even lingering or dying scents on the air. He couldn't even see Vlad's scent trail. Which was mildly concerning. He shifted both his hands into claws and circled on the spot, watching the short steel buildings around them. Vlad moved to cover his back and the two slowly moved up the street, cautiously aware of how silent everything was. Big Four? Has to be. Racks? I don't smell blood. I'm not getting any sense either. Quinnica then? I can normally smell them. I'm not even getting a whiff of you. So someone is shutting down both of our senses of smell. Freaks? They would know how to do it, and they have the drug manufacturing capabilities to make such a scent mask. But that means that they probably sell it. So it could be anyone. At least anyone we've ticked off. Vlad snorted as they slowly walked. That could honestly be anyone. So, who have you ticked off lately? Me? Come on. I've been gone for over a week. You lot have been the ones waging a war. What have you been doing topside but pissing off another gang? After pissing of the racks and the freaks? Then when you came back, you immediately got into it with the UGB. Dude, you're a walking disaster. Oh, shut up. Shaggy turned to look at Vlad and found that the vampire was staring up the street. Following his friend's gaze, Shaggy spotted a small, dark figure. They were standing in the middle of the street, dressed in black from head to toe. Shaggy grimaced as he tried to get another whiff of the air. But nothing came to him. The person was a blank void to his sense of smell. But his eyesight caught the prick just fine. Shaggy tensed his leg muscles and got ready to pounce. But Vlad stopped him with a whispered word. Roofs. Shaggy spun away from the figure in the road and glanced at the small shacks that dotted the street. Multiple dark-clad individuals stood on the roofs of houses, watching them. He sighed. He didn't know who this group of yahoos were. But they weren't here for anything good. He targeted the dude in the street again. I'll take the leader. You book it back home. Wait. We don't know who they are. We need to assess the repercussions of this. If we hurt another gang's people, the big four are going to come down on us. Only if we leave witnesses. Shaggy growled. Shags. Hold up. We need to see what they want. If they attack us, we can. Whip. Vlad never finished, as the soft sound of an air rifle came from behind Shaggy. Shaggy spun and Vlad shifted into mist. The vampire was quicker and re-solidified with his hand wrapped around something as Shaggy turned to look. Vlad had enough time to smile at Shaggy before crackling green energy exploded from his skin. Vlad screamed in pain and collapsed into the dirt. Whip, whip. Shaggy spun again as more noises came from around him. 2 small pellets hit his chest and Shaggy felt them embed themselves into his flesh. Shaggy growled and then roared as pain flared from inside his body. He saw the same green energy explode from his body, but he gritted his teeth and tried to activate a shift. Whip, whip. 2 more pellets hit his skin as Shaggy's body started to contort and twist. He felt his right leg go numb, and he fell into the dirt with a roar. His inner wolf disappeared into the blackness of Shaggy's mind as pain racked his body. He crawled through the dirt like a wounded animal. Not sure where he was going. Jesus. He's still awake? Shaggy glanced through half-lidded eyes as he felt the muscles in his arms give. The black-cloaked person from down the street was getting closer, hand raised imperiously. Shaggy snarled and tried to launch himself at the bastard. He felt his body leave the ground, and he traveled a short distance before he slammed back into the dirt. The hidden figure took a few steps back and shouted. Again. Hit him again. Whip, 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 whip. Shaggy barely heard or felt the pellets this time as his body sagged to the dirt. The last image he saw was the black-clothed figure eagerly running toward him. He really hoped he wasn't going to Deathville. He didn't need that shit right now. Shaggy also didn't want to hear Vlad's incessant complaints that he had somehow gotten them killed. That wasn't fair. Shaggy was 60% sure he had nothing to do with this one, maybe 50. Shaggy came awake slowly and groggily. It reminded him of a long time ago in college when he had celebrated passing a test too much. The headache was the same. Although the lack of control was different and alarming. His entire face felt numb and he couldn't feel his limbs and at all. Thankfully, his ears worked. But the sounds were a little muffled. Thanks, Rome. How about you tell me again? I get it. But the boss wants them both awake for when they get here. So we need them lucid. Shaggy felt his ears twitch as Vlad's voice came from behind him. Ah. And who would this boss of yours be, fair gentleman? Perhaps this is all a misunderstanding. I would hate for our 2 groups to go to war over something such as a mistake. Shaggy wanted to roll his eyes, but he could still barely raise his head. Thankfully, Frank seemed to share his annoyance. Zip it, vamp. You'll know who the boss is when they get here. You 2 are in deep enough shit as it is. I don't need you thinking you're going to start the conversation as equals. Log and FSOU. Shaggy spat, trying for intimidating, but his mouth wouldn't work. Jesus, Roman. What's wrong with him? 6, Frank. What part of that is confusing to you? 6 full doses of a heaviest necrotic paralytic the freaks can sell. I'm both surprised and terrified he is still alive. He should shake it off in a day or 2. Shaggy would have raised an eyebrow at that if he was able. He could already feel his toes again. He tried to twitch a finger, too. But he still couldn't feel anything in his hands. His vision swam in the room's darkness, and it was a chore to keep his eyelids open. Even his head seemed to flop around on his neck. He couldn't right himself, not yet at least. A day or 2? Roman, I told you the boss wants them coherent for their talks. Go get the cleanser. He's alright. Shaggy mumbled. Shaggy tried for an annoyed growl, but all he got was a weird gurgle. Something made his head flick to the side with a soft whump, but Shaggy felt nothing. A shape moved in front of him and Shaggy could barely make out flesh tones and clothes. "Shut up, Mud and Roman, go get the damn cleanser, now. We don't have time to play around. The boss is on their way." "Frank. I tell you this is a bad idea. One you don't pay me enough to make. Get the shit yourself. I am out of here. If you live, you know where to send my money." Shaggy heard moving feet and then the noise of a heavy door shutting. Shaggy could now feel his ankles and slowly tried to move them. Meanwhile, their lonely captor was cursing up a storm. Shaggy felt his head thrash again as something tried to move him. Vlad's voice spoke up from behind him. "Dude, chill. We can talk our way out of this. We don't want to get into the shit with multiple groups." Shaggy growled this time, and somewhere inside, he felt his wolf slowly stir. Suddenly he could feel his legs and his hearing wasn't as muffled as before. He tried to speak, but all he got was more mumble mouth. Vlad continued explaining why they should try to be diplomatic about everything. But Shaggy ignored him as he turned inward. His wolf was resting in its room, black tail wagging happily at whatever dream it was having. Did mental constructs dream? Shaggy shook the room mentally, trying to wake the wolf. But nothing happened. He gave a mental scream, but all the wolf did was roll over. Meanwhile, Vlad was still talking. "So please at least let me try to talk this out." Shaggy gave his vampire friend a grunt. Vlad must have taken that as agreement, because he went silent. Shaggy grumbled to himself mentally and went back to screaming at his wolf. He had some request, getting the thing to toss and turn. Whenever the beast was about to be roused, Shaggy felt a surge of power course through his body, slowly undoing whatever drugs were in his system. He could now feel everything below his chest, although he still couldn't feel his face. The sounds of footsteps and the door opening brought Shaggy back to himself. Frank had returned and was grumbling to himself. Vlad tried to start up another conversation with their captor, but Frank ignored him as he bent in front of Shaggy. Shaggy felt his nostrils sting as an acid scent hit him. He saw a flash of silver in Frank's hands and tried to get a better view. But his eyes and head still weren't obeying him. All of a sudden, Shaggy's world was alive. He could hear everything, and his sense of smell went off the charts. Frank's greasy features came into stark relief as Shaggy's dark vision went into overdrive. He felt his heart rate increase, and the wolf banged against the walls in its room. His arms and legs tried to shift, but heavy manacles on his arms sent a pulse of magic into him, which cut off his strength. Shaggy jolted and then slumped into the chair he was chained to as Frank backed away. His senses were still inflated and Shaggy got every centimeter of Frank's appearance. From the short-cropped haircut to the stench of alcohol and cigarettes on the man. Frank's matted hair stunk of sweat and metal, like he'd been wearing a helmet all day. The chubby man sent a kick into Shaggy's chest. But Shaggy's armor caught the blow and barely felt a thing. Adrenaline was coursing through his whole body and he had to clamp down on his inner wolf before it tried to burst free again. His arms hurt from where the manacle sent a jolt of magic through him. Frank obviously didn't like being ignored, because he started rapidly kicking Shaggy in the chest and then escalated to hitting Shaggy in the face. Frank! Frank! Quit it! You've made your point," Vlad called urgently. Although Shaggy couldn't tell if his friend was worried about him or their captor. Shaggy kept his focus on the wolf, though. It was roaring and rattling its little space with Shaggy, ignoring all attempts at being soothed. Shaggy tried mentally talking to the beast. When that failed, he tried to order it to stand down. But that also failed, so he marked Frank's scent in his mind and told his wolf that they'd seek revenge later. The wolf continued to growl, but calmed down enough for Shaggy to focus on his surroundings again. To his surprise, he saw Frank was no longer hitting him. Instead, a series of thumps and grunts were coming from behind him. He growled. "What happened, Frank? You get tired, or were my muscles too much for you? Did you hurt your hands?" The sound of a fist hitting flesh came again before footsteps made Shaggy turn. Frank was coming around to his side, fists raised. Shaggy flashed the man his fangs as Frank sent a hook right into his chin. The wolf growled and shook out its fur. "One," Shaggy said, glaring at Frank. Frank roared and threw another haymaker at Shaggy. Shaggy twisted his head with the blow as best he could. When he brought his head back, he grinned again. 2. Frank hit him again. 3. Again. 4. Frank drew back his fist and gripped Shaggy by the hair. Another punch slammed into the bridge of his nose, and Shaggy felt it crack. His wolf howled and Shaggy placated it again with another number. 5. Shaggy merely smiled and blew his captor a kiss. Frank roared and set about pummeling Shaggy into his chair. He wasn't aware if he was healing or not, but Frank's punches were hardly anything to worry about. Vlad must have guessed what he was doing, or he just wanted Shaggy to take the punches. Either way, Frank laid into Shaggy for a few minutes before he blew out a ragged breath. The fat man wheezed as he backed away. Shaggy smiled as he saw that Frank had torn open a few knuckles during the beating. "I lost count. Was I on 43 or 44? 44, Vlad said from behind him. "Calm down?" Shaggy snorted. "He wasn't talking to you, Frank." "Yeah, I'm calm. What you got? UGB Blacksite or Safe House?" "Scents are back. 15 warm bodies in the area. Can't tell friend from foe, though." "You?" Shaggy dragged his memory back to when he was hit with the accelerator. He got so much information that his brain was still processing a lot of it. Scents came from everywhere. He could confirm Vlad's body count. But he also thought he knew roughly where they were. 15 confirmed, and I think we are underground. I scented metal, burning ozone and electricity, though. So they probably have energy weapons down here. We really going to talk this one out? Yes, Shaggy. Shaggy rolled his eyes and glared back at Frank. Lucky. Frank glared back, clearly annoyed that he was being ignored. He reached back with his right arm again, fist clenched. But the sound of the heavy metal door opening stopped him. A heavily modulated voice echoed in their dark room. "Officer Jameson, you are relieved. Stand by for official reprimand." "But I said stand down." The voice modulator crackled as the person nearly shouted. Shaggy threw Frank a wink as the man marched angrily from the room. The door closed again and the sounds of heavy footsteps resounded. A large, metal-covered body circled around from Shaggy's right and moved toward his left. The person did a full circle around both him and Vlad before coming to a stop in front of Shaggy. The helmeted head twisted left and right as the person seemed to scan Shaggy's body. Shaggy gave the large metal monster a smile. "You're gonna want to talk to my friend. He's the one that wants to negotiate. I'd rather rip all your limbs off and use the parts as kindling for a barbecue." Shaggy, Vlad said, warningly. There was a metal snort as their new captor reached up and unclasped their helmet. Expecting to see Adjudicator Kyler, Shaggy was alarmed to see a waterfall of dirty blonde hair fall from within the helmet. The woman wiped her hair out of her face and leaned into Shaggy's face. He felt something try to grip his mind as he met the woman's red eyes. She sneered as the pressure on his brain increased. Shaggy grit his teeth and a low rumble came from his chest. The woman took a step back from the noise and she quirked an eyebrow. The pressure receded from his mind and Shaggy sighed. "Sorry. Only one woman lives rent-free in my mind, Adjudicator." Shaggy wheezed. "Ma'am, if I may ask? What is this all about?" Vlad said from behind Shaggy. The woman kept her red eyes on Shaggy as she answered, a small smile forming on her lips. "Inquisitor," she breathed. "Ma'am? I am Inquisitor Catriona of the UGB. I have been called upon to question you too about Adjudicator Kyler." "Hell of a way to start." Shaggy grumbled. Catriona's eyes seemed to harden as she answered. We were under the impression that you would not come quietly. Yeah, so better to abduct than to ask, right? Shaggy! Vlad shouted. Shaggy sighed and put his head down. If Vlad wanted to talk to these people, fine. He was going to check on his wolf. The thing was pacing back and forth, waiting for release. Shaggy kept an ear on the conversation, but everywhere else, he checked out. Vlad gave a cough as he called over Shaggy's shoulder. Inquisitor, I would be happy to answer any questions. Catriona glared at Shaggy for a few moments, before she walked around toward Vlad. The thudding of her heavy boots echoed in the small room. Shaggy used the chance to test his manacles, but the magic in them bit back at his hands. Even when he tried to shift, they delivered a magical shock to him. He thought he could probably ignore the pain of the shock. But he wasn't sure if he could break the cuffs. Vlad Kopish, one of the 5 leaders of a new gang calling itself the Legion. Shaggy blinked as he heard the name. Sure, they batted the name about amongst themselves. But he wasn't sure if they had come to an agreement on the name. Since when has that been a thing? We voted while you were gone. Vlad said quickly. Turning back to Catriona, Vlad added. And there are 4 leaders. Dude, what is with you and Dave? The guy is literally the most likable bastard anyone could meet. Sure, he's a little annoying, but come on. Not the time, Shag. 5 leaders. Shaggy said over his shoulder and went back to focusing on his wrists. Vlad hissed, but Catriona carried on. Ignoring their conversation. You both came into contact with Adjudicator Kyler recently, yes? Yes. This was a few blocks from the arena and Main Street, yes? Again, yes. Though I think it was more than a few blocks. We were in contested territory. Catriona's footsteps echoed again. Shaggy thought she was pacing. Really? Can anyone confirm this? Vlad scoffed. Other than your own people and ours, I'd say not. So there is a bias on both sides, Catriona said as she continued pacing. Of course. There's always going to be some bias. Have you not asked Kyler? Adjudicator Kyler has been afforded a level of leeway in this case. We thought it better to question the outsiders first. Question us regarding what? Catriona's footsteps stopped and she said. Our people have stated that they engaged in a confrontation with yours. Is this true? Yes, but we were in contested territory, and your people were trying to arrest one of our leaders. Hello. Shaggy said over his shoulder as he tried twisting his wrists. The manacles held firm as Catriona walked back toward him. So you resisted Adjudicator Kyler's attempts at arrest? Unlawful arrest on contest grounds. Vlad shouted. What he said. Catriona stared down at Shaggy's face before glancing back up toward Vlad. She heaved a sigh and raised an arm to her face. Shaggy saw a compartment open on her wrist. She spoke into the compartment quietly. But Shaggy caught most of it. He was sure Vlad did, too. I'm going to need all the records on the Quinnica/Legion engagement. Also, get Adjudicator Kyler down here on the double. Shaggy rolled his eyes. Isn't this also unlawful arrest? You can't hold us for nothing. Catriona hummed idly. Actually the UGB may hold suspects up to 48 hours on suspicion of illicit activity. What warrants suspicion? Vlad asked, as Shaggy rolled his eyes. Anything the UGB deems appropriate. Shaggy couldn't hold back a snort at that, but Vlad threw his back into Shaggy's, and he went silent. Catriona watched the exchange before returning to Vlad's side of the room. Shaggy bit his lips and tried to shift his right hand. A powerful jolt traveled through his bones, and he grit his teeth as he felt the manacles shift to contain his hand's new form. Shaggy let the shift go and felt the cuff shrink back down. He grinned. Can you confirm that Adjudicator Kyler was within the contested territory? Yes, said Vlad's voice. But Shaggy thought his friend sounded a little flat. Did your associate here attack any of our men? No. Vlad said in his deadpan voice again. Shaggy twisted in his seat, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Did our people start the altercation? Vlad's voice answered in its hollowed tone. I don't know. Shaggy jerked his head backwards, slamming it into Vlad's. His friend sputtered for a moment before groaning. Ow. What the hell, Shaggy? You got whammied, dude. Wha? Catriona's voice was casual as her metal armor shifted. We may use any and all means to discern the truth. Your associate seems annoyingly resistant to persuasion. So I had to go with you. You couldn't have asked? The ability works better if the victim isn't aware of it. Shaggy snorted. And you didn't use it on Kyler because... Catriona's heavy footsteps clanked against the stone floor as she rushed back to Shaggy's side. Her red eyes blazed with anger as she glared at Shaggy. One does not question a UGB adjudicator without probable cause. As you are both criminals, I can ascertain the truth any way I see fit. Except questioning the actually culprit. Shaggy growled back. Kyler is not the criminal here. Keep telling yourself that, Cat. Shaggy snorted. It's Inquisitor Catriona to you, criminal. She roared in his face. Shaggy scrunched up his face and ignored her outburst as he focused back on his hands. This nonsense was only going to take them so far. Meanwhile, Vlad went back to playing the diplomat. Shaggy, stop antagonizing her. Inquisitor, come back and talk to me. Use whatever methods you need to get to the truth. We don't want to be fighting a war on two fronts. Catriona continued to glare at Shaggy for a few more moments. Eventually, she shook her head and returned to Vlad. Shaggy shifted and unshifted his hand repeatedly, trying to get the timing right on the manacle's growth and shrinking. Each time he did, he had to grit his teeth against the shocking pain the manacles delivered. Meanwhile, Catriona was back to questioning Vlad. Was Adjudicator Kyler complicit in the activities of his men? He ordered them. Vlad said, sounding flat again. Why? I don't know. Did your friend instigate the confrontation? Probably. Hey. Shaggy said, honestly affronted. Were any Quinnica present? One dead elder. How did they die? Shaggy killed him. Why? They attacked us. Shaggy growled as another jolt of pain shot through him. Did your people not tell you any of this? There were like 6 of them. Catriona stomped his way again, her armored body clanking. But before she could say anything, the door to their cell opened again. Another heavily modulated voice echoed into the dark room. Cat? Catriona huffed angrily as she looked up toward the door. Shaggy looked and saw another person clad in the heavy armor of an adjudicator. Their armor hissed and whirled as they walked into the room and over to Catriona. They removed their helmet, revealing Kyler's tan face and black hair. Cat, what's wrong? Why haven't these criminals been judged yet? Catriona straightened her back and took a step back from Kyler. Adjudicator Kyler, you know that is not how we administer the law. Kyler reached an armored hand up to Catriona's face. Oh Cat, you know the law is anything we make it down here. These are criminals. Undertown would be better off with them off the streets. How did you even hear about them? Catriona's face contorted in confusion before she rallied her expression. Your men were slow in turning in their reports. When I questioned them, they mentioned your altercation with these 2. So I set out to find the truth. Kyler smiled happily. Well, the truth is easy to see. They assaulted my patrol and resisted arrest. Luckily, you arrested them now, and we can send them to jail. And you'll attest to that? Under mental control? Of course he won't. Vlad called, annoyed. Shaggy was still busy shocking himself with the manacles. He could feel the air in the room shifting, and he wanted his hands free for what came next. He almost had the timing down on the cuffs, and he was slowly pulling his hand free. Although the jolts were getting harder to ignore. Cat. Who are you going to believe? Me or these criminals? Catriona's voice hardened. Will you submit to questioning? Kyler sighed. Oh, Catriona. Of course I won't. Even if I did, do you think it would change anything? These two are criminals. It's our job to send them to jail. Let's just do that and forget about anything else. Vlad shook his chair in rage. Aren't you supposed to represent law and order in Undertown? You'd use deception to imprison two slightly innocent criminals? Of course we would. Kyler sneered. It doesn't matter the methods, so long all of Undertown is brought to heel under the UGB. We are the true government and we will see this lawless place brought back into the light. Right, Cat? Catriona's face looked pale as she watched the conversation. Shaggy felt his palm slip further down the manacle. Catriona shook herself and nodded at Kyler. Shaggy gave his right shoulder a jiggle and bit the inside of his cheek as he shifted his hand again. The jolt tensed all his muscles, and he felt blood fill his mouth. Catriona put a hand on Kyler's cheek and sighed. You're right, Kyler. It is the UGB's job to deal with criminals. Kyler grinned and reached for Catriona. Before Shaggy could blink, a red glow enveloped Kyler's entire head and a loud pop filled the cement room. Shaggy jerked his hand out of the manacle, feeling multiple jolts rack his whole body. Behind him, he felt Vlad's entire body disappear. He could see a black mist rush toward the door. Vlad stepped out of his mist and placed his body against the door. Shaggy stood, manacles hanging from his left hand. Shags, get yourself free, and oh, you did it. Really, Vlad? After all that talk about cooperating? Hey, I never said we shouldn't have a backup plan. How did you get the cuff off? Shocked the shit out of myself until it was loose. You? I can become intangible when I turn into a mist. Shocked me too, but not that bad. A whimpering sound drew both of their attention back to the floor. Catriona was clutching Kyler's headless body and sobbing quietly. Shaggy felt his eyes widen at the clearly distressed woman. Turning back to Vlad, he mouthed. What do we do? Vlad shrugged his shoulders and opened the door a crack. The noise of the heavy door brought Catriona's attention back up to them. She glared at them through teary eyes for a few moments, before she sighed. Corruption has always been rampant through the UGB. But I never thought it would reach us, Catriona said. She stood slowly and Shaggy grew his claws. Ignoring the pinch of pain from his wrist. Catriona ignored him as she gently placed Kyler's body on the ground and stood. She placed her helmet back over her head and said in her heavily modulated voice. You two are free to do what you want. No one was informed about this operation. Kyler's men will stay quiet. But if you come at me, I will defend myself. Shaggy shared a look with Vlad. The vampire shrugged, so Shaggy raised both his hands and backed away. Vlad did the same at the door, and they both watched as the sad woman marched out the door and turned to her right. She disappeared from sight and Shaggy blew out a breath. He didn't want to know what that was all about. But it felt heavy. Vlad was back at the door, looking left and right down the hall beyond. Now can we kill people? Shaggy asked as he shifted and unshifted his left hand. It took a few tries, but he eventually got that one free, too. It fell to the floor with a clank, and Vlad hissed angrily. Dude. Let's just sneak out of here and be done with this. Shaggy shook his head and looked inward. The wolf was standing in its room, salivating. Hungry and eager. Can't do that. Vlad rolled his eyes. We don't know where we are or whether we can trust Catriona. Shaggy snorted and glanced down at Kyler. Vlad looked down as well and gave Shaggy a chagrined look. Fair. But we still don't know where we are. Shaggy nodded. Okay, you go find that out and I'll clear this place out. Vlad sighed. You will not take no for an answer, are you? Shaggy smiled at his friend and pushed past Vlad into the hallway. A bright scent on the air led down the hall and Shaggy followed it as he heard Vlad speed away behind him. The scent led Shaggy into an enormous bathroom. Multiple sinks were lined the left-hand side, while the right was full of stalls and urinals. At the second sink, shaking his hands free of water, was Frank. Shaggy pounced, grabbing the man around the lapels and lifting him up. Frank sputtered, confused for a few seconds, before his eyes went wide. Shaggy gave the man his best feral grin as he drew his fist back. Frank tried to curl in on himself as Shaggy let fly with a punch to the bigger man's chest. The chubby UGB trooper flew back, slamming into the far wall. The man sputtered and coughed as he fell to the floor in a heap. Shaggy cracked his knuckles as he approached Frank's prone form. Leaning down into Frank's face, Shaggy smiled. 1. Shaggy wiped his knuckles on his pants and walked out of the last room in the hall. He didn't want to opt for his claws when dealing with the UGB troops. He hadn't needed to, and cutting people too. Ribbons was probably becoming his signature. Not to mention it was an overly bloody affair. He didn't need all that. Shaggy had punched his way through 4 of the rooms in the UGB base, and his shirt had remained spotless and intact for once. A noteworthy achievement. After leaving Frank's body in the restroom, Shaggy moved to the nearest door and started working his way down the hall. He'd counted 12 shitty UGB guards in this underground bunker. 4 in a bunk room by the restroom, and 3 in a kitchen area. Then there were 2 in the hall, probably investigating the noise. Finally, he had just finished 3 in what looked like a break area. None of them provided much of a challenge, really. Probably weren't worth much in the way of points either. Shaggy continued down the hallway. He had doubled back and checked the left end of the hall. But it was a dead end full of cells, much like the one he and Vlad had woken in. No one in them, just the faint smell of chemicals and blood. Shaggy had walked back and ran into the 2 geniuses, trying to investigate with stun batons and energy pistols. Now, however, he could see a stairwell leading upward and 2 open doors ahead. One on the right and another slightly further ahead on the left. He moved to the first door and peeked in. Inside was a large locker room. Rows of metal lockers were arranged around wooden benches on the floor. The sharp smell of fresh blood hit Shaggy's nose, and he grimaced. Vlad had probably come this way first. Which meant that the base was clear. Shaggy took a big whiff of the air and tried to discern the scents of the dead from those still alive. But all he got were the same vibrant colors of normal scents. He huffed. Moving to the second door, Shaggy peered in and saw his friend sitting at a large computer console. The vampire's long fingers played across the keyboard, typing away as he watched the screen. 3 bodies were sprawled in the room. One was pale and collapsed on the floor with no visible wound. The other 2 were torn limb from limb. It looked like they had exploded from the torso. Shaggy sniffed. Taking out some aggression, are we? Vlad didn't even turn around as he replied. You're one to talk. You catch Frank? Of course. Little shit didn't even last 10 punches. You are surprisingly petty. I don't see how that's a surprise. Shaggy said as he moved next to Vlad and looked at the screens. Long lists and invoices were thrown up on the screens as Vlad typed. Shaggy grimaced as he read over weapon and general goods shipments. It was a lot. Even their bar didn't need this much food. Did the UGB have an even larger force? If so, why weren't they out on the streets as much? Shaggy didn't remember seeing many uniformed thugs out on the streets of Undertown. But then again, he had been dealing with the Racks, and the Freaks and the Quinnica. We got a personnel list? Shaggy asked. I looked it over already. The numbers match, but their locations are written in an alphanumeric code. It's all Alpha Sigma Wincot 009 is staffed by 10 troops and needs these supplies. Well, can we download this and get out of here? The information would be useful, but I have to think these people need to check in. So we don't want to stay long. Vlad pointed a slim finger at a device on the far end of the console. Shaggy couldn't tell what it was. But it was a square black box with a cord attached. They already called in, and I gave them the call and response phrase. We're checked in as all clear. We've got 6 hours till the next check-in. How the hell did you do that? Shaggy asked, surprised. He looked down at the drained guard and the other 2 UGB troops. Can you read memories from blood now? Vlad spun in his chair, surprised. What? No. The dumbass wrote it down. He waved a hand at the desk. Shaggy saw a small yellow post-it with the call and response conversation listed in small handwriting. He coughed awkwardly before looking back at Vlad. His vampire friend rolled his eyes and spun his chair back to the computer. As for downloading stuff, that takes another password. But that one is not written anywhere. At least anywhere that I've seen. There's a cabinet by the door, but that was just holding weapons and armor. Speaking of which, why don't you go collect as much of that stuff as you can? Sure, there are probably some duffel bags in the locker room or something. We can stuff those with weapons and armor and then book it. You do that. I want to see if I can get anything from this. Shaggy groaned. Seriously, Vlad? You just said it was written in code. Also, I didn't think you wanted to get involved with the UGB right now. Not right now. But maybe later. Okay, but how does this information help us with later? It'll probably all be useless by the time we want to use it. Vlad shrugged, still not looking at Shaggy. It all helps. Troop movements, shipment methodologies, even a vague idea of how many grunts they have. It's all helpful. Shaggy growled low in his throat. Those were all good points. But he really didn't want to look through the small base for weapons while Vlad sat on his ass. It sounded like grunt work while Vlad was doing the important stuff. Then he looked down and realized his vampire friend was transcribing what he was seeing on the screen. The man was writing everything on a slim bit of paper with a flimsy-looking pen. Shaggy grimaced and decided on the lesser of 2 evils. All right then. I'll get on then. Call me if you see something interesting. I'll try to remember. Also, make sure that the Legion gets a cut of whatever credits you find. Shaggy waved a hand dismissively. Yeah. I know. But it doesn't look like these idiots carry much in the way of credits. Vlad sat up a little. That's odd. Shaggy shrugged. I'm off to collect stuff. With a grunt and a wave, Vlad said goodbye as Shaggy rushed from the room. His first stop was the locker room. If any place was bound to have backpacks and duffel bags, it was there. That hunch was proven correct as he rushed down the aisles, breaking the locker's flimsy locks. Most every UGB trooper had a backpack of some kind. But no weapons or armor. In fact, Shaggy was all the way down on the other end of the locker room before he found something interesting. Nestled in the far corner of the locker room, right next to a small shower room, was a steel cage. There was a door into the small room and Shaggy grinned as he noticed shelves upon shelves of weaponry inside the cage. It was a military-style gun room, where the UGB handed out weapons to its troops. Shaggy could barely contain himself as he rushed into the room, breaking the metal door in the process. But Shaggy didn't register the noise as he dove into the racks of weapons and armor with glee. Shiny, metal-looking armors and energy weapons dotted the shelves, along with secondary equipment. Energy cells, utility belts, handcuffs, and radio equipment. Shaggy couldn't keep the smile off his face as he grabbed a duffel off the shelf and started filling up. He was as careful as possible with the energy cells as the damn things hummed ominously when he grabbed them. But for the rest, he tossed everything into a bag and tossed it out into the locker room. Time flew by as Shaggy did his best to empty the shelves. Once or twice, he came upon a specialty item which he didn't recognize. Like at the end of one rack, he found a small square safe. Shaggy broke the lock easy enough, though the damn thing shocked him pretty bad. As his hand healed from the burns, he opened the safe to find a small container holding 7 vials on a bed of velvet. Shaggy sucked in a breath as his gamer senses were tingling. He carefully set the small black container aside and went back to loading up on weapons and armor. He kept having to go back for more duffel bags, but eventually he had a sizable hoard of loot. Apparently, the little bunker they were in was designed to outfit more than the 16 or so people that were stationed here. Or maybe they were just really cautious with backup weaponry. Shaggy tossed his 8th bag out into the locker room when he heard footsteps heading his way. He took a breath of the air and immediately calmed himself. Looked like Vlad was finished before he was. The vampire was moving toward the door to the gun room when Shaggy came back with a 9th bag. Geez. These guys were really planning for a damn war, weren't they? Vlad asked, eyes wide at all the bags. Probably not. Remember, there's a rumor that the UGB are working with the above-ground police. Also, hold up, you have an arms guy? Shaggy nodded. Kexar. Guy I met up top. He's an alright guy. I need to go back and see if he settled into our turf alright. Vlad shook his head as he jammed a stack of papers into the outer pocket of a duffel bag. Well, first we have to get all of this out of here. You carry 4, and I grab 5. It's not that hard, dude. Vlad gave him an incredulous look. Well, I'm happy you think I'm that strong. I can't carry 4 bags. What? I've seen you throw people around like rag dolls and punch your arm through people. I'm fast, Shaggy. My body is tough enough, so I throw myself around and sometimes, through people. I don't have the brute strength you and Ren have. Or even Dave, for that matter. Shaggy bit his lip as he looked down at his pile of duffel bags. There was no way in hell he was going to leave this stuff behind. Not only did their people need it, but it would be a huge finger in the eye of the UGB. He gave a grunt as he left 4 of the bags, 2 to an arm, and turned to Vlad. Can you at least take a few up the stairs? I can probably shift when we're back in Undertown and you can strap some bags to me. Can I ride your wolf form? Vlad asked. Dude, you probably run faster than I do. You're a giant black demon wolf with horns. We could probably get people to pay for rides. All it would take is a notice at how we roll and the players would come in droves. You do that and I'll def on your ass. Vlad merely rolled his eyes as he grabbed 2 bags and followed Shaggy. It was only 2 trips, but once they were back on the streets of Undertown, Shaggy quickly shifted and tried to orient himself. He did not know where they were, but the arena's familiar silhouette could be seen off in the distance. So at least they weren't taken outside of Undertown. With some helpful nosing and pawing, Shaggy showed Vlad which bag held long ratchet straps and the vampire set to work. Vlad attached all the bags through the straps and latched them onto Shaggy's lupin form. They itched like crazy, and Shaggy wanted nothing more than to scratch all the straps to ribbons. But he refrained, waiting for his vampire friend to vanish flitting about. Once 8 bags were strapped to Shaggy's sides and back, Vlad put a duffel over his shoulder and leapt onto Shaggy's back. Shaggy growled menacingly as the vampire got situated. Vlad paid him no mind and instead dug his heels into Shaggy's sides. Onward, demon stead. Shaggy could feel his large wolf eyes roll in their sockets. He gave a huff and jogged, testing his unfamiliar weight. Thankfully, the bags weren't too heavy for his wolf form and Vlad himself was entirely negligible weight-wise. However, the stairs they accumulated as Shaggy rushed through the streets were annoying. Shouts of alarm and surprise went up from the citizenry, and Vlad used the opportunity to show off. Fear not, people of Undertown. My fine stead is of no harm to anyone. He called as Shaggy picked up the pace. He was considering biting his friend's leg off just for the fun of it. But Vlad would probably grow the damn thing back somehow. Shaggy growled as he ran, humans and aliens clearing a path for him. He had to use the arena as a landmark, but Shaggy navigated his way to Main Street and then oriented himself back toward their bar. As he did, he heard and smelled the sounds of people behind them. Shaggy stretched his neck and looked back. Vlad was still seated on his back, but the vampire was turned around, calling joyously to a crowd of people following them. Shaggy gave a short yip, and Vlad spun back to face him. He gave Vlad his best, what the hell look, but the vampire's annoying smile never moved. There are adoring fans. Vlad called happily. Shaggy growled in his throat and did everything he could to speed up. He even ducked into the cramped streets of several shanty neighborhoods. Yet still, the crowd followed. Of course, Vlad calling out happily to them didn't help things. Shaggy took a sharp right and then a sharp left before jumping over several buildings. When he landed, he saw the empty square around the Viper's den just ahead. He put on a last burst of speed and charged down the road. Several of their lackey lookouts spotted him incoming and gave call-outs. But Shaggy ignored them as he cleared the street into the square. As he did, he spotted the bar and leapt, aiming for a spot just to the left of the entrance. Mid-leap, Shaggy cancelled his shift, hoping that Vlad would go tumbling toward the ground with the bags. But the blood-sucking bastard clutched onto his back like a damn koala. Instead, the bags dragged them both to the dirt as Shaggy's jump was thrown off, and they hit the ground a few yards from Shaggy's target. Vlad leapt from Shaggy's back as Shaggy threw off the straps and bags around him. They had drawn the eyes of several bar patrons as well as some of their lackeys. Shaggy spotted Dave standing next to the bar with his usual band of NPC friends. The smiling play gave him a wave as Shaggy turned to Vlad. Vlad was glaring at him. What the hell? Shaggy quirked an eyebrow. What the hell to you? Why were you egging on a bunch of jackasses to follow us? We're carrying a shitload of weapons and armor, and you want people to see where we put it? Shaggy grimaced as the crowd of people that were following them rushed into the square. He could see several of their eyes searching for a large black wolf. He stuck a finger in Vlad's face. If one of those Wong rods asks for a wolf ride, I am going to start cutting people, Vlad. Bar be damned. I am not a theme park ride. I mean it. Vlad waved a hand. Yeah. Why don't you get the bags inside while I deal with the crowd? Shaggy huffed, but nodded. He waved Dave over as he knelt down to grab as many bags as he could. Dave's footsteps came skipping his way, and when Shaggy stood back up, the man was happily shuffling around. Dude. That was so cool. Mid-air shift into an impromptu piggyback ride. So choice, my dude. What's all this stuff? Shaggy grunted as he stood with several bags strapped to his body. I'll explain inside. But grab what you can. We need to get this downstairs and squared away. Slink still down there? Yeah, little dude is working his snake tail off. We need to get him out of that dark cave and into this dark cave? You know what I mean. Little dude is spending all his time doing logistics. We need to get him out of there. Shaggy and Dave barreled their way past the lackeys guarding the side door. Dave gave them both a cheerful smile and a brief explanation. But Shaggy merely rushed down and through the door into the crowded common room again. He fought his instinct to just dump his bags and tell all the boys to have it. Instead, he marched over to Slink's war room and kicked in the door. The slam of the wooden door against the cement wall brought the eyes of several lackeys, both inside and outside of the room. But Shaggy ignored them as he set the bags on the floor and looked around for Slink. Dave joined him and placed his own bags on the floor as well. Shaggy caught the eyes of several taller lackeys, and he couldn't spot Slink through all the bodies. Slink? You here? The bodies moved aside as the boy's voice rose above the crowd. That you, Shaggy? Don't slam my damn door. Slink was still stuck at his place of power, near the front of the war table. His fingers were flying across the terminal's keyboard as he worked. Shaggy grunted and pushed his way through toward the boy, Dave following behind. Shaggy figured that they needed to get an armory made as quickly as possible. At the very least, they needed to get the weapons handed out quickly. When he arrived next to the skinny teen, Shaggy leaned over and whispered, "Can you clear the room? I have something I want to discuss." Slink raised an eyebrow and gestured toward the war table. "Dude, I have work to hand out." "What is it, and can it wait?" Shaggy shook his head. I don't think so. I got a lot of loot to hand out, and we need to make sure it goes to the most loyal members. Slink sighed. Yeah. Loot distribution has been lacking. We have the point buy system and everything. But we need a proper shop or something. After rubbing his face, Slink tapped a button on the terminal and a red light flashed in everyone's eyes. It was accompanied by a 3-second beep that made everyone in the room groan, annoyed. Shaggy shook the spots from his eyes as the sounds of footsteps filled his ears. Dave cackled happily from over Shaggy's shoulder. Dude. Was that the new warning system? Most awesome. Yeah, but I think I need to dial down the flash of color. The beep should be enough. Shaggy nodded as his vision cleared. Yeah. Whatever the hell that was, didn't need to blind my ass. It's a Legion-wide signaling system. The 3-second beep means all leaders need to come to the war room. I said it, and apparently lackeys all get the message. Hopefully, Ren and Vlad get the idea as well. Vlad was with me when we collected the stuff. So he probably knows what's going on. What about Ren? Slink gave a half grimace. He's been stomping his way through most of the Quinnica's old territory. Which has been good for us, but he's had to return to the Needle Sisters 3 times so far. It's only been a few hours. Shaggy exclaimed. Yeah, the dude's been going super hard. Petra informed me he was in the building, so he'll probably show up soon. Shaggy gave a nod and looked down at the war table. The small 3D model of Undertown was more fleshed out and Shaggy could see several red dots to the west of their bar. Slink scrolled the table across some buildings, and Shaggy could see even more buildings light up. Apparently, their scouts were taking advantage of the lack of Quinnica patrols. There was even more data being collated about the various buildings out west. Shaggy cast an eye over Slink and saw the boy sway slightly on his feet. Shaggy grimaced and gripped the kid by the arm. He sat them both down and Slink almost fell backward. The kid tried to get back up, but Shaggy held him down and growled. Relax kid, you look ready to fall over. Where's a damn chair? You need to sit and take a break. Slink shook his head and tried to stand again. This time, Dave slapped a hand on the boy's shoulder. Slink groaned and fell backward as he tried to explain. We need to keep our lackeys busy. If they get stagnant, they'll start planning something stupid. They need constant oversight. Why does that have to be you? Where are you on crafting a team to help you with this? You can't be stuck down here all the time. Shaggy asked. Yeah, Dave added. Also dude, if the lackeys need something to do, have them train. We always got room for some good workouts. Can't get up to mischief if you're too tired to move. Least that's what my dad used to say. Slink rubbed his eyes. I haven't found anyone trustworthy enough to help with the war table. As for working out, the gym we have is always full and there's a big-ass wait list that half our guys don't want to bother with. Ren's voice rumbled from the door as his enormous frame entered the room. You have to build trust with them yourself, Slink. As for the lackeys, we can all find something for them to do besides working out. Slink groaned again. Like what? We don't want to move toward expanding our borders. That'll piss everyone off and there are only so many patrols I can arrange in a day. We're actually pretty covered with patrolling and protecting our interests. What about on Levy's side? Doesn't she need some lackeys over there? Yeah, I got a steady stream of grunts that want to help over there. Most of them are interested in getting some proper housing. So they are rushing topside to buy things. Shaggy grinned. Well, see, that's how we motivate people and keep our guys busy. We don't need to expand our borders. But we need to get this base up to standard. We need more rooms. Like that shop you mentioned, and an armory and a shooting range. Slink gave Shaggy a confused look. Why a shooting range? We have more melee weapons than ranged ones. At least for now. Shaggy held up a finger and moved to get up. But a black bag hit him in the face and he fell back onto his ass. Vlad's smug voice spoke from the doorway as Shaggy felt his nose reset itself. Not anymore, kiddo. We got a shit ton of weapons and accessories. Courtesy of the UGB. Shaggy pushed the bag off himself and glared at the vampire. I thought you were outside with the adoring masses. Yeah, well, most of them lost interest when the giant wolf disappeared. But the others are now happy patrons of our fine establishment. With some even commenting on moving to our territory. Apparently, most people thought that there was nothing but wild gangs and robots out this way. Well, bully for you. Shaggy grumbled as he opened the bag. Inside were several black armor sets and some small arms. Shaggy showed them off to the room. Slink and Dave looked amazed. But Ren was grimacing. Although Shaggy thought that could have been from all the wounds on the big guy's gray skin. Ren picked up a piece of chest armor and looked it over. This is some decent stuff. But the problem is, it has got the UGB brand all over it. Shaggy grimaced as well. He had noticed the 3 letters ingrained on all the armor and equipment of the UGB. It didn't present a problem, but not one Shaggy was too worried about. So they'd masquerade as the UGB for a bit. Didn't sound too bad to him, honestly. Ren sighed. You don't get it, do you? We can't hit the streets repping someone else's gang. The Big Four will come down on us, and the UGB will know who took their shit. This stuff is great, but we can't use any of it. What about the chair dude? Can he do anything with it? Rolled? Maybe. But do we really trust him with our equipment? After the shit he pulled, he's liable to take it and run. Slink argued. I don't think so. The little shit tried to play multiple sides against the middle and got pinched hard. He's lucky we took him in before he was grabbed by someone else. All we gotta do is keep him close. Shaggy tapped Slink's knee, nodding. That shop you were talking about. We can build it down here. Along with a shooting range and anything else we need. Slink stood and rubbed his face. With what resources? We need some building materials. Levy's got wood over on our side of the portal. Shaggy said. And we can cannibalize some of the house in Quinnica turf. Most of them aren't even being used. I think most people started leaving the second the space vamps showed up. Slink moved toward the war table terminal and sighed again. But Dave gripped the boy's shoulders and spun him away. Ren stopped Slink from falling on his face and righted him. Dave smiled at them all. Nah, little dude. You go make friends. We will handle the paperwork stuff. All we gotta do is get the lackeys moving, right? Ren let go of Slink and nodded. I'll help gather materials. Most of the Quinnica are on the run. At least they run when they see me, anyway. I'll dig out some rooms. Most of the stuff around here is dirt, right? So I'll grab a few lackeys and inspire them. Shaggy smiled. Vlad placed an arm over Slink's shoulder and shook the boy. And I'll teach our young man here how to be personable. Slink sputtered, but stopped when he saw all of their faces. He gestured weakly at the war table, saying, You can order some stuff from Levy's side of the portal through the terminal down here. She'll probably request more men to help. But we can spare it. It's the quickest way to get furniture, too. Just make sure you input all the reports as they come in. They deteriorate quickly, and the information becomes useless after a while. Oh shit. Vlad said, pulling a stack of papers from his cloak. I should get these inputted, then. He moved next to Dave and started putting in the reports from the UGB Black site. It was quick work scanning all of Vlad's scribblings about the UGB. Once he was done, the war table quickly zoomed out and revealed red dots and pulsing blue lines all on the other side of the arena. Shaggy guessed that the blue lines were shipment routes for UGB equipment and the red dots were the patrols. Slink stared down at the table in wonder as it continued to populate with more information. Where did y'all get all of this? It might become useless in the coming days, but it is a lot of information. Vlad smiled as the last bit of paper was fed into the war table. It's a long story and one I will happily tell you over a drink upstairs. You can have a soda, kid. Vlad gripped Slink's shoulder again, and they both marched out of the room. Shaggy turned to the other two players in the room and sighed. It's not that long of a story. The UGB abducted us and tried to interrogate us. It did not go well for them. Ren grunted. You didn't leave witnesses, did you? We don't need more shit to handle than we've got. Shaggy waved off the big rhino man as he searched the bags on the floor. Ease up, Ren. We didn't leave anyone. How do you think we had time to grab all their shit? We are in the clear. Shaggy found the small black case he was looking for and placed it on the table near Dave. I'm going to dig out this cave. Guard that with your life. I don't know what it is, but something tells me it's important. We need a scientist to look at it or something. Ren smiled for the first time. You mean a chemist? Chemists, scientist, geologist, vaporist. I don't care. We need someone to figure out what all those chemicals are. My gut says something important, though. I know enough not to distrust your gut. Ren snorted. I'll start knocking down buildings. You got everything handled, Dave. Totally, big dude. This table is actually pretty intuitive. Shags, I'm going to mark the spaces we need cleared and you can start digging. Big dude, all you need to do is put the materials close to the bar and we can use them in the construction of new rooms. It'll cost us some creds, but it'll all be worth it when our crew can get a good workout in. Shaggy and Ren shared a look before they shrugged at each other. If Dave said he had it, then they would trust him. Or in Shaggy's case, he sure as hell didn't want to do it. He reached into a bag and grabbed an energy rifle. Ren gave him a curious look as Dave went back to typing on the console. Shaggy simply turned and walked back out into the common room, holding the gun above his head. Listen up. Who wants a go at one of these new weapons? We need a shooting range and a few other rooms built out. If you want to play with our new toys, you got to help out. You don't want to help, then go sit your ass down and maybe you'll get a chance later. How about I just take that gun from you and jam it down your throat, short stack, someone called. Shaggy grinned. You are more than welcome to try. But whoever tries will not like the outcome. He waited several beats, but when no one approached, he turned back to the war room and set the gun inside the room. Closing the door firmly, he spun back to address the crowd again. Ren was already pushing his way to the surface and several people were following the big guy. Shaggy rubbed his hands together, looking around for something to mark where Dave wanted him to dig. He circled the common room until a light blue glow caught his eye. It was down the hallway where several rooms were and Shaggy hurried to find the source of the light. Footsteps behind him told him that several lackeys were following. He rushed down the full length of the hallway before found a section of dirt wall. It was lit up in the shape of a square and pulsing gently. Shaggy turned to see if anyone else could see the light, but all he got were blank looks. Arg! A shout came from back down the hallway. But Shaggy ignored it. Someone had probably tried to grab a rifle. Shaggy mentally thanked Dave as he grew his claws out and started digging into the soft dirt. Thankfully, it fell away easy and Shaggy kicked the dirt back toward the grunts. The lackeys seemed to know what to do as some started helping Shaggy tear into the soft wall. Others started collecting and moving the dirt back down the hallway. Shaggy sighed as he followed the blue outline. It was in the shape of a hallway, and Shaggy figured that Dave was building another set of rooms for them. He set his brain to thinking about other things as his body tore into the soft dirt over and over. Shaggy was surprised to find that it was extremely soothing as he dug out a new hallway. It felt nice to actually start building something. Most of the work had been done by lackeys. But here he was happily making a space for their legion. It was going to be great, and the lackeys were going to love it. He briefly wondered if he should call some of his pack to help. But they deserved their own break after everything that happened topside. Shaggy shook dirt from his body as he shoveled even more behind him. As he did, a section of the wall flattened out and a metal wall popped into existence. The first of the walls had been put in. Shaggy grinned. They were on their way. Shaggy grunted as he palmed another fistful of dirt and pushed it behind him. His claws really weren't made for digging, but they had done well. They sliced cleanly through the mounds of dirt and churned it up until it fell away from the walls. Thankfully, the blue walls Dave drew on the system terminal made it impossible for Shaggy to dig beyond the dimensions of the room. So all he had to do was dig like a dog, and Dave would build the walls out of the materials Rin gathered. The dull, rusted gray walls weren't much to look at. But they gave the hallway a nice, complete look. It also helped that Shaggy and the digging team didn't have to prop up the walls or nail them into place. The system did most of the heavy lifting. Things really got going when more lackeys showed up. Not only could they break off into building separate rooms, but some of them had super strength or other powers. So the work picked up speed. Soon, there were sections of wall that were still covered in a blue sheen, waiting for walls. Shaggy had to send a couple of guys to Ren to farm more materials. But his dig team was still moving faster than Dave could get the walls up, which allowed for a lot of breaks. "Does using them claws even help, boss?" one lackey asked. Shaggy was leaning against the wall, wiping sweat from his forehead. Turning to the guy that asked, Shaggy's dark vision brought the guy into sharp relief. Although the alien man's glowing green eyes helped a little as well. Shaggy shifted his hands back into claws and waggled them. Shaggy grinned as he watched the alien man gulp noticeably. Several other lackeys nearby smirked as they shoveled dirt back down the hallway they had built. 2 rooms were being excavated off the hallway they had made, but Shaggy continued to follow Dave's hallway. Someone had found, stolen, or conjured some shovels and other tools. So the boys were doing decent work. Although Shaggy wondered what they were doing with the dirt. The alien man fell into silence after his question, and Shaggy grinned. A few of the lackeys had tried to strike up conversation with him. But Shaggy found that few of them maintained the interaction. Mostly, they would ask a few meaningless questions and then move on. It was like they were introducing themselves one at a time, which Shaggy found interesting. They each had their own personalities and ways of talking to him. He even caught a few weird accents amongst the aliens. They were truly some impressively fleshed-out NPCs. Shaggy went back to digging out the wall ahead of him as his dirt-shifting team moved to help. While his body and arms went to work, Shaggy turned his mind inward and did a check on his pack again. He had been intermittently checking on his people as he worked. Shaggy found that if he concentrated and focused inward, he could get and see much more from the members of his pack. Tom was off sleeping on the 2nd floor. Sybil was talking to several mages and experimenting with her demon fire. Seacrass and Stanley were still hanging out, but now they were sparring with every lackey that would challenge them. Not far from them, Vic was teaching the lackeys about the energy rifles they had picked up. They were using the robots and shacks to the east as target practice. Further out east, Rita was roaming around, probably taking the teens through their paces. Ephemera was harder to pin down, but she was also the furthest out from all of them. Also, since the link was weaker with newer members, Shaggy couldn't get a good feel on the woman's current state. But he thought she felt fine. At least he wasn't getting any sense of alarm or danger from her. So he let it be. She was out scouting in Quinnica turf, and so far all he could feel from her was a vague sense of annoyance. But Shaggy figured that was her permanent state. Shaggy felt his claws dig into sludge and sighed. Coming back to himself, he noticed a pale blue wall of light right in front of him. They had hit the end of the hallway. He shook out his claws as people scurried behind him, moving the dirt. Looking to his left and right side, Shaggy saw that the hallway broke into a T-section, and he gave another sigh. He was about to order a team to break left when a spike of pain hit his brain. It seared through him and made him stagger. Shaggy growled loudly and shook his head. The pain receded to a dull ache, and Shaggy looked around for the source of the attack. But anger flowed through his body, and he realized one of his pack was under attack. He searched the links and found that every one of them had felt the spike of pain too. He zeroed in on its source and found Rita to the east, running his way. Shaggy gave another growl. Boss? You all right?" Shaggy shook his head again. "Keep digging. There's an issue topside." Crash. Shaggy turned to see Tom's slim form curled into a ball as he broke through the second-story window. The slight werewolf hit the dirt and rolled, before popping up a few feet from Shaggy. Just beyond him, Vic, Seacrass, and Stanley were running fast toward them. Lackeys on nearby roofs were shouting and screaming. But all the noise blew past Shaggy as another spike of pain wrenched through Rita. He felt it as clear as day and started to move as Tom asked questions. "Where is she? Is she hurt? What about the kids?" Shaggy waved the other man off as he slowly moved east. Rita was about to enter the east side of the square, and she was sending signals that whatever was chasing them was right behind them. Sybil slid to a stop on Shaggy's right side, fireball at the ready. Shaggy started to shift and felt his body contort and twist angrily. Something was hurting his pack, and he was going to tear the damn thing apart. Soon a kid popped out of the street along the east side. It was Haru, and he was bleeding from a scratch in his temple. The boy was followed by Branka, who was carrying someone. Then Nate, Otto, and Isabel came barreling down the street. Shaggy was already moving. He knew Rita was bringing up the rear of the kids, probably why she was taking the hits. Branka and the others tried to tell him something. But Shaggy ignored them as a rumbling shook the streets. He looked up to see a metal monstrosity pulled itself toward them. Shaggy grimaced as he spotted several flying robots coming over the eastern shacks. Below them was a horrible amalgamation of robots. It was in the shape of a giant, with glowing red eyes and a body constructed piecemeal of its fallen brethren. It sparked and hisses of smoke plumed from its body as it pulled itself closer. Shaggy saw the rest of the kids just in front of it as Rita waved her sword underneath it, trying to get its attention. But she was bleeding heavily from several wounds, and the giant robot didn't seem to pay her any attention. Instead, its red eyes were trained on the back of the retreating kids. Shaggy growled and charged forward. They were up the street a short distance, but Shaggy didn't like the low hum that was rising through the air. Through the link, he felt Rita's despair and helplessness as she tried to get the thing's attention. Instead, the red of its eyes narrowed to a point and blasted forth as a laser aimed right at the back of the retreating kids. Shaggy pounced to catch the blast with his body, but he knew he was too late. A howl of anger went up and Shaggy felt a pull on his link with the pack. Suddenly an auburn-furred body was in front of Shaggy and he had to twist out of his pounce. A dog-like yelp went up and Shaggy turned to see a large wolf standing in the street. Its auburn hair smoking as the laser dissipated into nothing. Rita shook off the blast and growled low in her throat, standing before the giant robot. Shaggy felt a swell of pride build inside him, but a bark from Rita made him refocus. They could celebrate later. The 20-foot-high half-giant stumbled as Rita hit it in the chest, and when Shaggy slammed into its right arm, the thing tumbled into the dirt, wrecking multiple houses. Screams went up and were suddenly cut off as the owners of those houses were crushed. Shaggy gave a mental groan as he bit and clawed at bits of exposed wire. They were probably going to get complaints from the citizenry that paid them protection. Then again, if they didn't know enough to evacuate when a giant robot was barreling through, that was their fault. Shaggy leapt away as the arm he was trying to maul moved and the robot brushed at its chest. Rita was smacked with the metal stump and sent into the dirt, and Shaggy pounced again. This time hitting the robot in its giant square head. As he dug into it with his claws, a black mist appeared near its face and Vlad was suddenly their hand thrusting forth into its eyes. The vampire grinned as the robot's eye cracked and then sparked dangerously. Shaggy had to cut back another smile as Vlad went rigid as his body coursed with electricity. A loud clang filled the air and Shaggy looked down to see Ren in the street, punching into the robot's metal torso. Shaggy glanced up further and saw multiple lackeys rushing over with energy rifles at the ready. A blue blur jumped from a nearby roof and Dave's voice echoed in Shaggy's ears. "Go on, kick." Dave's blue armored form spun in the air as it rushed toward the metal monster's head. Leg forward in a jumping kick that seemed to speed forward like a guided missile. Shaggy bit deep into the metal of the robot's shoulder when Dave's kick rocked the thing's head back. The only noises the automaton made as it tilted backwards were its normal hisses of steam and sparks of electricity. Shaggy found that he didn't like it when his prey shout or cry in terror. Instead, the big metal beast tilted and then fell backwards. The sounds of energy rifles firing joined the cacophony of noises filling Shaggy's ears as he continued to rip and tear into the metal. Vlad, Ren, and Dave were there with him, beating and tearing metal plates from the thing. A robot crashing near Shaggy's head reminded him that there had been flyers too, but he figured the rest of their legion were focusing on those. With a shudder and a crash, the half-built metal monster came to an abrupt stop. Shaggy continued to tear into the thing as Vlad rushed to his side. Shaggy spat a mouthful of metal and was about to go in again when Vlad's cool hand brushed through his fur. "Cool down, Shags. I think it's dead." Shaggy growled low in his throat before he snorted at the unmoving body. He turned away, kicking his back feet at the thing before he looked around for his pack. They were easy to spot as Rita was still in her wolf form. Shaggy thought she was even preening as the others all congratulated her on her first shift. He felt equal amounts of pride and annoyance from the other full worse of his pack. "Is that your first full werewolf?" Vlad asked. Shaggy nodded his large lupin head as he cancelled his transformation. He felt himself twist and shrink as Vlad studied the other wolf. Nearby, Ren and Dave were already talking about what to do with the giant robot's remains. But Shaggy was more interested in where the damn thing had come from. Spotting the teens slowly approaching Wolf Rita, he had a good idea who to ask. "This is another brand of trouble we didn't see coming," Shaggy muttered as he started walking. "Yeah, but we handled it well. And who knows? Maybe this is a one-time thing." A flying cat drone fell out of the sky near them, and Shaggy gave Vlad a raised eyebrow. The vampire sighed and nodded understandingly. It wasn't a one-time thing. The robots or Cog were up to something. Although Shaggy doubted it was Cog, the rumor was that the geriatric bastard was off in a pocket dimension somewhere. So who was building giant robots in Undertown now? The eastern side of the city had been a dead zone for all residents. Between the gangs and the lack of shops, it wasn't exactly an overly used space. Then Cog invaded and now the area was full of either gangs or robots. A fact Shaggy now found odd. Cog had attacked with a shit ton of robots. But they had to have been whittling their numbers down. Right? Shaggy drew closer to Rita, who was still preening in her wolf form. "Okay, show's over. Now time to see if you can turn it off. I would go into a shack or something before, and you're naked." There was a quick gasp as Rita threw back her hair and stretched. Fully nude. Shaggy turned away as he heard wolf whistles and more cries of alarm coming from the nearby lackeys. "Damn, Mama Wolf." He heard one of the teens say Shaggy thought it was Rue. But he wasn't sure. "Shit, Rita." "Really?" Sybil asked. Lackeys and other people pushed in closer and Seacrass, Stanley, and Vic formed a wall and Rita still sounded unconcerned. "You couldn't have gone into a shack and waited for one of the teens or Sybil to grab you something?" Shaggy said to empty air as he pointedly looked away. He was surprised to see Vlad still watching everything. But the vampire seemed more concerned with getting answers. Nearby, several lackeys were ignoring their surroundings because of the naked woman in their midst. Shaggy even spotted Slink staring. He sighed. "Inside, Rita," he ordered. He heard the older woman sigh herself and marched off toward a short building. There was a crash as she kicked open the door, followed by some swearing. Then an alien man was thrown into the street and the door was shut. Shaggy rubbed his face and looked toward Sybil, but the short blonde was already gone. Racing off toward the bar to get the woman some clothes. A general noise of complaint went up from the assembled crowd, but Ren's voice echoed through the streets. Oh, quit your whining, you bunch of pervs. We have to get this beast back to the bar. So grab what you can and start moving it. We can't let these resources go to waste. Y'all heard the big dude, right? Let's get this thing back down the street. Maybe we can make some cool stuff from it, Dave added, still armored up. Shaggy let them deal with the enormous beast as he moved toward the teens. They were crowding toward the shack Rita was in as Shaggy approached, Vlad on his heels. Branka spun on a heel and blocked the door, glaring at Shaggy. Where do you think you're going, boss? A snort came from the shack before Rita's voice shouted. Leave him alone, Branka. I know we tease him. But he's loyal to his wife. Besides, I'm not the only one he wants to talk to. Shaggy nodded as Branka seemed to calm down a bit. First off, congrats Rita. You pulled off a full shift. How you feeling? Like a damn raw nerve. Everything's heightened again. It's like when I first joined you and when you finally bit us all at once. It's exhilarating and freeing, though. Yeah, it can be a lot. Quick question, if you look inward, do you see anything? Look inward? Like with your inner wolf thing. Exactly. I want to get ahead of that if you're the same. I don't think so, boss. At least I don't sense anything inside me. Otto snorted loudly before Aki smacked him on the shoulder. Shaggy saw Haru's ears turn red, and he quickly tried to change the subject. But Vlad beat him to it. Where did this giant thing come from, Rita? We have gotten no reports of something like this before. So, where did you find it? Before Rita could say anything, the teens all started talking over each other. Shaggy tried to get a word in, but they were all shouting and talking over each other. He was about to yell when Rita beat him to it. Quiet, she shouted, making all the teens immediately clam up. We found it toward the far eastern border of Undertown. We were pushing further and further out. Wrecking bots, when that thing just pushed itself from the ground. Yeah, we took off and the damn thing just ripped itself from the ground and chased us. It seemed to zero in on Rita a few times. But after she tanked 2 of those eye blasts things, it ignored her. Rue explained. Shaggy nodded as Sybil arrived with a bundle of clothes. Branka moved aside as she let the smaller woman in. Vlad was tapping his chin with a fingernail as the sounds of rustling clothes filled the air. Behind them, the sounds of hammering and the lackeys chattering joined in the noise. Shaggy rubbed his face and shrugged his shoulders. We need to check it out. Whether it's Cog or some dumbass rebuilding his bots, we need to investigate. Vlad nodded, smiling. Sounds like a job for all of us. It's been a while and I need to make up for getting ganked by that speedster. Let's gather the leaders and see what we can find. Shaggy nodded as Rita stepped out of the shack fully clothed. He gave her a nod and turned to head back to the bar. A pair of arms wrapped around his body and he was squeezed in a powerful hug. He felt himself tense up before he realized it was Rita. Thank you, Shaggy. This is an amount of power I never dreamed of wielding. Rita whispered. Shaggy grunted. Yeah, just had to almost die for it. She smacked the back of his head, and he almost tripped. But she caught him and whispered. It was worth it, boss. Shaggy smiled and sighed. Yeah. Just keep watch on the kids, Mother Wolf. A chuckle swept through everyone assembled except for Vlad, who still looked thoughtful. Shaggy waved off the teens and the others as he walked off. Gripped Vlad's shoulders and led him toward Ren and Slink. The pair were standing near the collapsed giant's torso, talking about where to move everything. Shaggy waved at Dave, who was talking to a few lackeys, and screamed. Dave, over here. Leader meeting. Dave gave him a nod and said goodbye to the lackeys. Ren and Slink turned to regard Shaggy and Vlad as they got closer. What's up? Ren asked. Vlad rubbed his hands together excitedly. We got a mission for the leadership. Shaggy pointed at the large metal robot. This came from our eastern border. Rita said it came up from the ground and started chasing them. So either we missed a bunch of robots or someone is rebuilding the damn things. Who the hell would do that, and how have we missed them so far? I send patrols out here daily. Slink asked. Are the patrols actively hunting the robots or just dealing with the ones that they find? Vlad asked. Slink shrugged, unsure. Ren nodded as he crossed his arms. So you think the giant was a response to the robots being culled too much? Possible. But we don't know if the thing was a plant from Cog or if something else is going on. Oh. So you dude, want to, investigate the source of the bots? Awesome. I'm totally down, dudes. What about the bar? We still need to be on the lookout for the Quinnica, and we have several projects going. We need someone here for oversight. Do we? I mean, we give the lackeys some jobs and let them work. Most of the operation knows what it's doing daily by now, right? So let's give them a chance to run on their own for a bit. Yeah. Also, with the new expanded workout room, we can assign daily workouts. It's pretty epic. So we can let the lackeys train themselves. Of course, we can add to the effect by leading a few sessions ourselves. But we can discuss that later. Also, we can automate certain work orders. Slink nodded. Yeah, that's how I did the patrols and the shipment protections. Yeah, little dude. So all we do is set the training and work schedules to random and then pile up the work we want done. Then we can go off on our own adventures, dudes. Dave cheered loudly as he thrust both his arms in the air. Shaggy kept the grin from his face as he looked at Ren and Vlad. Both appeared deep in thought. Shaggy figured they were probably trying to work out what they wanted done in their absence. Shaggy figured he could get his pack to help with training and some patrols. He also wanted his people to check on Levy. Hey, for all we know, this could lead to a small-time crook messing around. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. Shaggy said. Ren nodded. True. But it could also lead into a deep, dark dungeon of nonsense. The type you seem to attract. So let's plan for a long trip. That way, if we're back early, then there's no harm. Shaggy and the others agreed. Dave rushed off to build work orders as Ren and Slink turned back to the giant robot. They were going to finish getting the materials home as Vlad gathered his thralls. Shaggy was going to explain things to his pack and then go through the portal to Levy. He didn't want to disappear without telling his wife. Especially if it was for something involving Cog. For all he knew, the bastard had used his shitty invasion to set himself up somewhere below Undertown. It was unlikely, but Shaggy wasn't ready to discount it. His pack was waiting for him outside the bar. The teens hanging further back, looking on. Shaggy raised an eyebrow as Rita and the others glared at him. He felt their annoyance and understanding at being left out. All he could do was shrug. Me and the other bosses can handle it. He said simply. We know you can, boss. Vic said around a cigarette. We just wanted to let you know that we're here, too. Shaggy tapped his temple. I know you are. But I need you all here maintaining order and whipping some of these normies into shape. We're going to leave some work for everyone. So you'll be kept busy. What about us? Otto called. First you have to talk to your wife, though. Rita grinned. Your relationship is weird, boss. Sybil called. I know. Now get back to work. I want to leave this place in expert hands. Trouble is, all I got is yours. Levy was surprisingly understanding of Shaggy's decision to hunt down the cog lead in Undertown. Then again, she was nestled comfortably in their half-constructed log cabin. Meanwhile, lackeys ran everywhere collecting wood and other materials. She even had several of them building their log cabin. Which they all seemed happy to do. The lackey's quiet obedience had confused Shaggy until he spotted several piles of smoking ash near the cavern's terminal. Someone had tried to get uppity with Levy and she had put them down. Now all the lackeys rushed to complete her orders. When Shaggy asked how the trees were still regenerating, Levy had explained. They aren't. The mages and I are still searching for a proper generator. Magical or otherwise. For now, all the lights and things are powered by whatever the grunts can steal. Shaggy nodded and explained his own situation. Levy nodded understandingly and gave him a quick peck, telling him to go have fun with his friends. Shaggy had kissed her back and quickly returned to Undertown. He knew that if he stayed with Levy any longer, they would find some other trouble to get into. As much fun as that would be, Shaggy wanted to figure out what was going on with the robots. Once back through, Shaggy immediately heard the sounds of rushing feet and suppressed shouts. He exited the portal room to find lackeys running every which way. Shaggy raised an eyebrow, but didn't ask. Instead, he followed the mass of thugs out and into the light of Undertown. Once there, the thugs dispersed and ran in many directions. Shaggy thought he saw Seacrass and maybe Stanley running with the crowd. Once he checked his pack link, he was sure. Probably a patrol heading out. Shaggy thought as he spun in place. It was a safe assumption, and when Shaggy saw a few handcarts being pulled toward the north, he was sure. The carts were under guard and headed right toward the northern tunnel. Probably on a supply run. A burst of black mist brought Shaggy's eyes to the front of the bar, and he hurried over. Where there were thralls, there would be Vlad. He found his vampire friend directing his various thralls to various areas. Shaggy walked over in time to hear Vlad issuing patrol orders for his people. He nodded and stayed quiet as the thralls took their orders with serious faces before vanishing in a puff of black smoke. Shaggy sighed and waved a hand as the odorless smoke disappeared just in time for the next thrall to get their order. It was another few minutes before Vlad was done, and he spun to see a very bored-looking Shaggy. "How long have you been there?" "Since Costa? Or was it Ruby? I don't remember. It was a bunch of thralls back." "Did you have to give them all separate orders, one at a time?" Vlad snorted. Of course, a vampire lord hands down edicts personally to his thralls. That doesn't sound right. Shouldn't you have someone do that for you? Shut up. What did you tell your group of thugs? My pack is smart enough to figure it out. All I had to tell them was to watch the bar and maybe oversee some training. Go on a few patrols, yada yada. Shaggy bragged. That is so vague. Shaggy shrugged. It works. Are we ready to go? Vlad nodded and moved toward the bar's front door. Yeah, Slink was checking over a few minor details, while Ren is setting up a supply rotation. Now that we have the northern tunnel, we can manage supplies to our area much better. That was all the carts? Vlad nodded, understanding. Yeah, we need trucks. We have a couple people topside and down here looking. Once we get a few more trucks, we'll be better supplied. We seem to be doing fine, Shaggy said as they both entered the bar and looked around. Slink was over by the bar rapidly talking to an annoyed-looking Petra. Ren was across from them both, with a wry smile. The big guy was writing something on a table before he handed it to a nearby lackey. The lackey gave Ren a quick bow, before rushing off to fulfill whatever order was given. Shaggy shook his head and moved to help Petra with Slink. Before, the woman punched the poor kid in the head. Vlad following along, they reached the pair just as Slink was saying. Also, make sure that the orders are fulfilled quickly. Yes, Slink. And that rolled gets set up in the area we marked out for him. Yes, Slink. Oh, and that our guys collecting the protection money are well guarded. Yes. Slink. Shaggy quickly wrapped an arm around the boy and turned them away from the irate-looking woman. He gave Petra an apologetic look as he dragged the boy away. Slink sputtered and tried to keep calling instructions over his shoulder. Vlad moved to talk to Petra as Shaggy maneuvered them toward Ren. The Paranadan was openly chuckling now as Shaggy and Slink approached. What the hell, Shaggy? I was giving instructions. Slink whined. No. You were telling the woman who has been helping you run the business how to run the business. Ren chuckled louder. Ha 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 ha. You were about to get smacked, is what was about to happen. And you were just watching. Shaggy argued, waving a hand at the bigger man. Yeah. I was. Everyone needs a good smack every now and again. Keeps us humble. Slink would have taken the hit and then thought about his actions. He's introspective enough to realize it was his fault. My fault? For what? Issuing orders. We need to make sure that all this stuff gets done while we are away, or we are going to be dealing with a large shitstorm when we come back. Shaggy gave a Ren an "I told you so" look and turned to the red-faced teen. Slink. Dude. Were you issuing orders or reiterating them? Slink took a few seconds as he huffed angrily. I mean, I had already set the commands via the terminal downstairs with Dave. But I just wanted to make sure that they would be followed. Aw shit. There it is. Ren grinned. Shaggy sighed as Vlad suddenly appeared at his side. The vampire gave the kid a pitying look before he turned to the others. Petra's annoyed, but understanding. She'll make sure the place doesn't burn down while we are away. Is there anything else we need? Dave? Shaggy asked. He's downstairs talking his people through a training regiment. That extension you added to the workout area hasn't been fully kitted out yet. But they can still use it as a sparring area. He'll be up in a bit. Already here, little dude. Are we ready to rock some robots? Dave said as he slid over, clearly coming out of a run. Shaggy spotted a black case in the excitable man's arms. He almost started as the vials re-entered his mind. Shaggy reached for the black container. But Dave's hand was suddenly blocking his path. Shaggy looked up and saw Dave's smiling face. Oops. Sorry, dude. Force of habit. Lots of dudes seem to want to peek inside this little black box she gave me. I had to break a few hands. It was intense. Shaggy nodded as he stuck his hand out. Sounds like it. Can I have it though? I think I know someone who can look at it for us. Is that the thing from the UGB base? Vlad whispered. Shaggy nodded as he took the box from Dave and hurried off behind the stage. He felt the others follow him as Vlad explained what they had found. He opened the box quickly and spotted the colored vials still nestled safely in their velvet seat. Shaggy rushed through the back hallway and into the infirmary to see Rashi seated at her desk. Reading a book. She glanced up at him and then back down to her book. You don't need to be here. We both know that. So what do you want? Shaggy grinned his best salesman grin and moved toward the woman's wooden desk. Behind him, the others all piled into the room. Ren, closing the door with a soft click. Rashi put down her book as Shaggy gently set down the case and pushed it toward her. I would like your professional opinion on this. Rashi tilted her head, expression still neutral. What is it? Shaggy waited for her to reach for the box. But when she didn't, he sighed and cracked open the lid. The 7 vials seemed to glow with their multicolored liquid as Rashi glanced at them. Shaggy tried to read the woman's face. But it was a mask of stone as she sat up straighter in her chair and pushed forward. She picked up one vial, and the liquid sloshed and swirled in her eyes. What do you know about them? Rashi asked as she gently placed the vial back in its seat. Virtually nothing. We found them and wanted to get a professional's opinion. I know you're not a chemist or anything. But I figured you could help. I can, Rashi said simply. But I'll need to call in a friend to help. You just want to know what they are? And how to use them if there are special ways to imbibe them. Vlad added. Why not just drink one now? Rashi said, pushing the case toward Shaggy. Your healing can probably mitigate any ill effects. Shaggy grinned. I try not to drink things if I don't know what they are. That could be some kind of special acid designed by our enemies. Rashi nodded slowly as she took back the box. I can do it. But I'll want payment. Of course you do, Vlad said flatly. Shaggy merely nodded and then turned to leave. Yeah, we can talk about that when you have answers. The leadership is heading out for a bit. We found something interesting. The giant robot? Rashi asked. Shaggy nodded. Yep. If there are more of the damn things around, we'll all be in trouble. I'd pull your sisters back in and have them help. But that's up to you. Rashi went back to her book and pulled the black case into her lap. Shaggy looked at the others. But none of them had anything more to say, so they all left. Shaggy closed the door behind them all and sighed. Can anyone else not get a read on her? She's like a damn statue. Slink shook his head, as did the others. Except for Dave, who wasn't paying attention. She just seems a little too severe to me, Slink said. Stick up her ass, is what you mean. Vlad scowled. Ren herded them all back toward the bar floor. Let's just go. We have a long walk ahead of us. Not if Shaggy wolfs out again. We can all ride him and get there, like, super quick. Dave almost shouted. Shaggy shook his head. Hell no. Not only am I not carrying all of you, but I doubt Ren would even fit. I ain't that big compared to your wolf. Although Rita's wolf seemed bigger. Not to mention I like the color of her fur better. It's a lighter color. Your dark black coat makes you look all edgy. Slink said. Shaggy was about to complain when Vlad piled on. Yeah, and the eyes don't help. Super edgelord. No. I meant like literally edgy. Like sharp. He looks like if you pet him, you'd prick your finger. Slink explained. We are so done with this conversation. Shaggy groaned as they all exited the bar and turned toward the east. Their walk was an animated one. What with Dave constantly running all over, introducing himself to locals. Vlad was also chatting up everyone they came across. It seemed that the robot's rampage had relocated a lot of the population. While Dave was understanding and empathetic, Vlad was the salesman. Selling the idea of safety and happiness if the people moved closer to the bar. Some bought it, some didn't. But it all made Shaggy feel slimy. More so when Slink got involved. We also have daily supply trains coming into our neighborhood. We can place orders for anything you could need. Slink was saying. Of course, we would charge a small fee. Which pays for protection of the goods and keeps us all afloat. Vlad added. Shaggy sighed as he kept moving. The others had caught up multiple times already, and they would again. Ren kept pace with Shaggy as the others worked the neighborhood. He looked up at the big alien. Not going to schmooze with the locals? Shaggy asked. Ren snorted. Hell no. Ain't my thing, same as you. Hey, I can schmooze with the best of them. I just choose not to. Uh-huh. Sure. Face it, you'd rather be punching something than talking up our services. It is a much simpler pastime. Shaggy admitted. Ren nodded. I agree. But we also need people like Slink and Vlad. They are a 1-2 punch when it comes to ingratiating ourselves with the locals. Not to mention Dave's natural charisma. He'd draw people to us just by the strength of his personality. Fair. But I want it to be known that I am only this way in game. Out of game, I am a successful businessman with many happy clients. How many do you interact with regularly while on a job? If I'm doing the job right. None. I go in, fix the issue they are having, then duck out. I give them an invoice. They pay me electronically, and I'm out. Quick, clean, and efficient. Ren's chuckled rumbled low in his chest as he shook his head. I bet your number one complaint from your customers is that you're too distant. Shaggy threw up his hands. I'm a repair technician. We don't need to be close to customers. I just need to do the job. Ren let it drop as he turned around to look behind them. Shaggy did too and spotted the others happily talking amongst themselves as they walked. He turned back to Ren and smiled. As he did, he spotted a large empty area off to the right. Most of the houses in the area had been knocked down by the robot. But there was no debris, and the surrounding houses were bent inward toward the open area. Shaggy tapped Ren and pointed. Ren followed his finger and then nodded. This way. Ren called to the 3 stragglers as they left the road. Shaggy and Ren rushed over between the broken house and debris. As he approached, he realized the space was a massive indent in the ground. Probably where the metal monster clawed its way from the ground. The ground was slanted toward a large opening in the dirt. Like a large ramp leading down into a cavernous maw. Dozens of broken shacks and rusted metal junk were at the bottom of the ramp. Movement. Ren said, pointing a massive finger down near the bottom of the ramp. Shaggy focused on the area, but saw nothing for a few moments. Eventually, when the others joined them, Shaggy spotted a shifting piece of metal. It was creeping toward the tunnel opening. Shaggy raised an eyebrow. It could have been the ground settling. But when he turned to tell Ren that, Slink gave a shout. Look! Shaggy spun again and looked down. The shifting piece of metal got caught on a nearby piece of debris and almost flipped. Shaggy spotted a small, spider-like robot dragging the metal toward the tunnel. He sucked in a breath through his teeth as now he saw the little robots everywhere. The pile of trash hid them pretty well, but once you spotted one, it became easier. Those are definitely cogbots, right? Vlad asked. I don't know. Shaggy said. I've never seen spider ones. Most of Cog's designs have been humanoid. What about the catbots? Slink asked. Or the rabbit bots? Added Dave. Shaggy sighed. Fine. He is also known for creating animal robots. But we still don't know if this is him. Ren chuckled and cracked his knuckles. Doesn't matter. These damn things are in our backyard. We need to cull them and get into that tunnel. I'd bet that's where the giant robot came from. You think? Doesn't the cave entrance seem small? Shaggy said, looking down the ramp at the entrance. It looks like a dungeon entrance in a fantasy game, Vlad added. Dudes. Is this a dungeon? Sweet. Dave shouted excitedly. I didn't think this game did dungeons. Slink pondered. Shaggy shrugged and started walking down the ramp. He grew his claws out as the others followed. Nothing to do but find out. If it is a dungeon, then we are gonna get the first clear. If it's just another tunnel, then we will follow it and kill every bot we find. Deal? Sounds good. Deal. Righteous. This can only end badly. Shaggy ignored Slink's pessimism and hurried down the slope. Looking for a target. He was eager to sink his claws into the metal of the robots again. By the sound of the rushing feet behind him, his friends were too. Shaggy spotted his first target and grinned. The spider was dragging a large piece of metal and hadn't spotted them yet. Shaggy activated his pounce ability and cackled as beside him his friends found their own targets. The group's next dungeon dive was underway.